Hello, everybody. Welcome into my latest live broadcast. Today is Tuesday, the 12th of May, 2020. My name is Carey Holzman. Thank you so much for joining me today. And they have just released some restrictions with the shelter-in-place stuff here in Phoenix. So, haircut. I think I left more on the floor than they left on my head, but that's okay. Give me some time to grow it back out. Welcome in, everybody. Good to see everybody here in the chat. We're going to do another live build today. This build today, in celebration of 300,000 subscribers after this overnight success of a YouTube channel that's been up for 12, 13 years. Some YouTube channels hit 300,000 subscribers in a few months. I take 12 years, what are you going to do? So my thanks to everybody who helped make that possible. Thanks for being a part of this community and for joining me. And today I'm going to build the most common configuration I get asked to build. Now, regardless of your personal feelings towards AMD or Intel, what matters is who's writing the checks. So you can tell me how great AMD is, and you can tell me how great Intel is, and I honestly, and I'm just being one-to-one with you here, I don't care. When you are writing a check and you're asking me to build an AMD or Intel system, I care because I have a business to run. And so sometimes people say, well, it's all about the money. Well, you have to keep the power on, right? I don't have mommy and daddy paying my bills. So I rely on income in order to make ends meet, in order to buy food so I can eat, in order to buy everything I need, internet service, this camera equipment, microphone equipment, everything I need. Month after month after month, the bills keep coming, and so I have to keep working. And so there's a certain number of people out there that don't pay anything for content, and they just assume that anybody who makes money from content, is somehow a bad person. But rest assured, I'm not getting a yacht anytime soon. That being said, you'll also see I don't have any sponsors here, although I am trying to change that very slowly and lightly with hand-selected sponsored companies that I feel comfortable with sponsoring, or having sponsor me, I should say, and being affiliated with. These are companies that I think offer a great product. They've been around a long time. It's not like some new kid on the block that might go out of business next week. And I think offers a great value to you as the viewer, that I'm proud to be associated with. And hopefully we'll have a good response with that sponsor and they'll stick around for a long time. In the meantime, I ask those of you who enjoy the content and wish to support it to contribute in any way, shape, or form, whether that's sharing the videos or using my Amazon links in the video notes below. Anytime you make a purchase from Amazon, the channel will get a small commission. So if it's stuff you're going to buy from Amazon anyway, all you have to do is use any of my links, any one of them that takes you to Amazon. Once it takes you to Amazon, purchase anything in that browser session, and the channel will make a small commission. You pay nothing any different. It's another way to show your support. All my friends in blue hanging out, and just people who are not yet blue, but are in the chat room, and they're being friendly, and they're communicating, and they're being positive, and they're being supportive. That's another way of showing your support. All of this all adds up, ladies and gentlemen, to creating and sustaining a community. And when the electric company calls and asks me where my bill is, I don't get to tell them, well, you should just be giving me the electricity for free. I suppose I could tell them. People have different rules. Like, if the power company says you got 3 days to pay your bill or we're cutting your power off, people understand that. But when the computer tech doesn't get paid and they say, sorry, we don't have the money to pay you, well, they certainly wouldn't do that with the power company. And we talk about stuff like this on the Tech Vets podcast. Myself and Mike Smith are seasoned veterans in technology with over 50 years of combined experience between the two of us, and running our own business and dealing with situations, not just technical situations, but customer situations. If you're interested in becoming a tech, or you already are a tech and interested in starting your own business, or you already have your own business but you're looking to expand and grow, check out the Tech Vets podcast. It's completely free. It's at tech-vets.com. There at TechBets, you'll also see a donate button in the upper right corner. You can use that to support both the TechBets and the YouTube channel here with contributions. And that being said, this is not a telethon. I'm not here to ring you for contributions, but I do want to make new viewers aware that that's how this show is being supported, so I don't have to come out here and be a mouthpiece for any particular company. I will be the mouthpiece for my customers. So, for example, this customer wants an Intel build, and this is my most common configuration that people are asking for. What is it? This is the H370 HD3 motherboard from Gigabyte, and there's no RGB on here. It's a full-featured ATX motherboard, and we're going to pair that with the 9700K Core i7. This is about a $390 processor. They're easily in stock. There's a lot of people fixated in only watching videos or not understanding why somebody would build a computer not using the most expensive and untested latest hardware, such as where's the 10th gen Intel chips? Well, it's really not a good value for me to recommend to customers. For hobbyists at home with money burning a hole in their pocket who like to experiment as a hobby, the 10th gen chips and motherboards are the highest price they will ever be, and they're a little hard to get because everybody in that particular, not everybody, but a large portion of those people are buying them up because they want to be first. We're going to go ahead and let those people be first, let them deal with any particular issues they might have, and then we'll come in 3-4 months down the road. We'll save a little money. We won't have to wait in line to buy one or keep checking the website for when they're in stock. And we'll let those people be the pioneers. And the pioneers are the ones who get the arrows in their backs, and that's not good for business. And as I mentioned, just running a business, the idea here is that we're giving customers a very good value. We don't want to sell them something so inexpensive that it costs us a lot of money to support or ruins our reputation as to the quality of the builds, or that it becomes obsolete sometime soon where an upgrade is required, within the next couple of years. On the other hand, I hate to sell somebody something that's the latest and greatest that will reduce to half its value in a year's time, and ultimately may not make much of a difference in in practicality in how they use the computer. In other words, whether or not you've got a 7th generation Intel chip or a 10th generation Intel chip may not affect the perceivable performance that the end user actually feels depending on how they use their computer. Not everybody is rendering out videos while doing 16 different things simultaneously like you might be doing at home. And a lot of those people who are those kind of power users typically don't order computers from me. So it doesn't make sense to make videos for those people because they already know everything. So my intent is to make videos for the average ordinary person out there who owns a computer, and maybe you were curious how they work, or when you see how easy they are to put together and you finally get up the guts and the bravery to do it, because I'm going to show you how easy it is, you're going to have a computer that's going to be the best computer you've ever had. You'll never buy another pre-built again. I promise you, you won't do it. This will be the quietest, fastest computer you've ever owned, and it will also be the most reliable computer. And do you know why? Because when you want something done right, you've got to do it yourself. And I'm here to show you, anybody who wants to do this can. You don't have to have any prerequisite knowledge of electronics or computers, none whatsoever. If you follow along with me, buy the same parts I have, follow along step by step. I include every bolt, every wire, and every screw throughout this entire process, which I'm not aware of any other YouTube channel that's as thorough as I am. And we take our time. We don't race through the build. This is not a contest. Enjoy building the computer, because I promise you, when you're done, you're going to want to build another one, and they get to be pretty expensive. So unless you're lucky enough to be able to get paid to do it, the chances are you'll only build a handful of them in your lifetime. But it's a very rewarding experience. It's always fun, even when it's sometimes frustrating. It turns out to be a wonderful sense of fulfillment when you overcome the obstacle that was in your way. It's a great learning experience, and at the end, you have this machine that you're relying on, that you're using every day. This is not a novelty. This is a tool for you. You're using it to communicate. You're using it for your entertainment. You're using it for all these, how many hours a day we use our computers. So to have it hand built by yourself, with something that you're using every day is a level of satisfaction there that only people who have done it understand what I'm saying. So I hope you'll seriously consider, if you've not yet, building your own computer. I've had some people reach out to me and ask me to build for them. This channel was never meant to be a commercial for my business. I like to help people. Sometimes people confuse me with selling them a computer. I don't sell computers. I assemble them and configure them for people, and I do that for free. People just pay for the shipping. So with that being said, things are super, super busy. Some parts are very, very difficult to get. And I had stocked up on a few parts before all of this crisis occurred. And today we're going to start utilizing those. You may find some of the parts in this build are not available on Amazon right now. And that's because of this current pandemic that we're living in. It's not because the parts aren't made anymore. It's nothing to do with anything being obsolete or never coming back in stock. It's temporarily out of stock. They will return. You have to be patient. Check the website every day, literally every day, because when it comes in stock, it's a supply and demand issue right now, and people will snatch it up real quick. Until things settle back down, we can expect that to be the norm for a few months. In the meantime, hello to all my friends again here in blue. Thank you guys for all of the contributions. Let me give a shout out to everybody who's contributed so far during the broadcast. Our first contribution from Abdul Azim Patel with $19.99. Thank you, Abdul. Samuel Ramos contributed $10. Joe Bush with $4.99. And he says, I hope everyone is doing well today. Kevin Arsenault joins us from Canada, contributed 20 Canadian dollars. Andrew Lipinski with a $5 contribution says hello to me in the chat. David Starbuck, $20 contribution. Thank you, David. He says, congrats on 300K, and I'm looking forward to 600K. Yeah, me too. That'll be great. I want to see this community grow with like-minded, kind, and supported individuals. And if we have to kick out 300K in order to get to that 600K, because they're, trying to destroy the community, I got no problem. As long as the community is as strong today, or it remains as strong as it is today, we'll kick out who we have to in order to maintain that foundation of strength and solidarity that is pretty rarely found on the internet. And I'm very proud of this, and I'm so glad you guys have chosen to be a part of this amazing community. Orlando Breve contributed $2. He says, looking good. Right on, Orlando. Thanks. He said as he spits. Mark Stevens contributed $10. He goes, hey, Carey, buy some Cokes. Right on, Mark. I think I will. So today's case, we're using the ever ubiquitous Corsair 200R. I keep looking around at different cases that come in here, and the more I see different cases, the more I like the 200R. There was some rumor going around that Corsair was going to stop making this case. To the best of my knowledge, that was nothing more than a rumor. The problem with the ease of which information is disseminated on the internet is it doesn't really have much of a truth filter to it. And therefore, even the videos that you're watching now, including myself, you should be fact-checking everything rather than just assuming that it's true and then parroting that information onto other people, repeating false information back to other people because you're like, did you know this? I didn't know this. The reason you didn't know certain things is because it wasn't true, and somebody wants to see if you're going to look up the word gullible because it's not in the dictionary. So my recommendation for all of you out there watching is always verify information before you publish it. And otherwise, you're just part of the problem. And then furthermore, if you can't be bothered to verify it, then don't publish it. And stop copying and pasting stuff. If you can't originally write down your own ideas, don't forward other stuff that you didn't write. It's I don't know. I get messages from people where they're just forwarding little, I don't know, videos and things onto me that are not things they've created. They could be poems or they could be whatever. It just feels like plagiarism. But when you sit down and you actually type something out that you came up with on your own, of course, you're absolutely always glad to hear from you guys. So thank you again for all the contributions that have come in. I see a few more that have come in, and then we're going to get started here on the build. Jamie, wait a minute. Mark's brother, 715, contributed $14.99. He goes, Carey, your videos are so informative. I learned so much. Well, thank you. Jamie M contributed £5. He goes, Carey, I'm waiting on parts to build a Ryzen 5 3600 RTX 2060. It'll be the first gaming PC I've built in a while, and congrats on 300K. Right on, Jamie, and I'm sure it's going to be a great gaming machine, great computer in general. Mira Ora contributed 10 bucks and says, "Hey, Carey, have a case of Coke." Thanks, you guys. Kevin Arsenault contributed 20 Canadian dollars. He says, "Congrats on 300K. Keep up the good work." Hey, thanks, Kevin. And Darren Cluth contributed 5 bucks. He says, "I hope you're having a good day, Carey, and thanks for what you do." Well, thanks, you guys, for all of your support. Wouldn't be at 300K without you, and I appreciate that you guys hang out with me and participate. The participation part, we got a lot of viewers. They just lurk. Really bothers me that they don't jump in and say hello. All you gotta do is say hello. That's all you gotta do. But whatever, be comfortable. That's the most important thing. It bothers me because the idea that somebody is not communicating, growing up as a shy person with very low self-esteem, I sense that. I sense that as though they think they're not worthy or they have some form of anxiety. And I want everybody here to feel safe and comfortable. And you should always feel comfortable enough to jump in and say hello. If you don't, if there's anything I can do to make you feel more comfortable, please let me know. Because that's a very sensitive thing with me. We got your back here. I can't speak for other places on the internet, but you're going to be okay here. Just don't be a jerk. A little bit of the packing material there. So the Corsair 200R, this case I really like because for $75, I got everything that I require in a case. Which is, I don't need the RGB, I don't need the clear panel, the window. It's just fingerprints, and it's going under a desk. Nobody's going to see it anyway. I got two USB 3.0 ports, not one USB 3 and one USB 2, which really screws you over as the person paying for it because you can't just have one. The connector that connects up one supplies two. So if they're only giving you one, they're stealing one. They're not available. You might think you're saving some money by buying a case that has one USB 3 and one USB 2, but you're actually losing two USB ports. You're going to consume two USB 3s and two USB 2s in order to get one USB 3 and one USB 2. And because USB is backwards compatible, there's no benefit to you to have a USB 2 connector. They could all be USB 3, all the way across the board, front and back, sideways, and they would all work just as well. If it's USB 2 and you're trying to plug in something USB 3, that will also work, but only at the USB 2 speed. So what I require from a case is two USB ports. They've got to be located on the top of the case. The reason I want them on the top of the case is so that if I plug in like a mechanical drive or something, I can sit it on top, and the cables are often too short to run along the sides. Also, if the USB ports or buttons are on one side or the other, you've got to think about where the computer is going to be placed. So let's picture this with me, if you will. Let's say that this whole bank, power switch, audio, and USB, let's say that was sideways and it was put down here at the bottom. Now let's say I'm sitting at my desk and I put this down on the floor where most people keep their tower computers, and I push it off to the right against the wall to get it out of my way so I have room for my feet. Well, now I've got a wall right here. How do I have to reach across the entire front of the computer. I've got to bend down, right? Which you're going to have to do anyway, but I won't have to bend down as far if the USB ports are on top. And now I've got to like feel for and find and get between the case and the wall to find the USB ports or the power switch or the audio. It's really stupid. It's incredibly stupid that manufacturers don't make that reversible, and that seemingly no other YouTube tech channels really talk about this. This is a sincere problem when you're a technician and you're working for a company and they're moving employees around. So perhaps the office is moving, or perhaps they're putting two people in an office that previously had one, although they're not doing much of that right now. But this was a thing. And then where you didn't have a problem before, now suddenly you've got one because of the restriction of being on one side or the other with the switches. Furthermore, When you put a drive like these mechanical external drives down on the floor, they tend to get kicked. They tend to get knocked over, and that'll pretty much kill them every single time. So by having the USB ports up on top, once again, shorter cable length, you can rest the device on top when you need it. You don't have to bend over as far, and you don't have restrictions with left or right, which is also why I don't use case doors. I also like that we still have these panels, so if we want to put an optical drive in, despite the elitist snobs who say they're not necessary, they're just not necessary for you. Believe it or not, they're still necessary for a large portion of people who work for a living, and they require it. But a lot of modern cases are strictly being made to appeal to gamers because the gamers are the ones that are easy to price gouge. When we take a case like this and we make it smooth and put a glass panel on it and paint it cherry red and throw some RGB on it, we can ask $175 for this $75 case with $5 worth of improvements because that's the gamer crowd. So as a business, you'd be a fool not to chase after that extra money that the gaming crowd is so willing to spend for nonsense. As a business selling computers to other businesses, they don't care about that stuff. And it's not to make fun of anybody, but it's to point out the obvious, which again, it doesn't seem like anybody really talks about, which is saying, look, let's just observe what's really happening here. Let's just take away the emotion from it. Forget how cool it looks. And let's look at what you're getting for the money. And I think for 75 bucks, there's nothing on the market that compares with this. And there's more. Not only do we get the proper location of all the I/O, the front port I/O, not only do we have 2 ports available for any optional optical drive, memory card reader, whatever you want to put in there. At least it's an option. With these other cases, too bad, so sad. You also get 2 fans, a front and a rear fan, come with this case. I just showed you a case the other day that had no fans in it at all and was twice as much money as this one. So when you look in here, you'll see we've got a rear fan and a front fan. These are both, looks like 140 millimeter fans. And one of my favorite things about this case is we can install up to 4 mechanical 3.5-inch hard drives and at the same time, 4 2.5-inch solid state drives, and we don't even so much as need a screwdriver. We don't need any tools. They simply slide in and these levers lock them into place. Why isn't every case like that? This is 2020. And yet cases are still using drive sleds, drive rails, specialty screws and washers that people lose. The drive rails get lost, they break, they crack, they're plastic, they get dry, they get brittle. This is solid. Slide it in, it clicks into place. You can optionally put a screw or 2 screws in to secure it if you want to. You don't have to. It's the easiest thing ever. Even up here, we've got 3. Did I say there were 2? There's 3 front bays up here. 1, 2, 3. And these are also toolless. This little part pulls back. The drive slides in and locks into place. Now, I will typically use 1 screw on each side to secure it when I'm shipping a computer. But if I'm building it for myself, it's not going very far, one room to the other. So again, no screws, no tools. Load it and lock it. Now, for all of those features, you think this case would be more money, but it isn't. And furthermore, it's solid. It's not made of this really super thin, cheap aluminum that some of these inexpensive cases are trying to hit a price point. But they've got to keep the profit margin. So when you're buying a $30 computer case, I assure you the manufacturer is making about as much profit on that $30 computer case as they're making on the $60 computer case. What they're doing is they're giving you less, but they're not giving themselves less. And I think you've got to keep that in mind when you're shopping for computer parts and you think you're getting a deal. I assure you the company has to be sustainable. They're not giving away stuff and they're not selling it at less than cost. That's not a sustainable business model. It's just business 101. You're there to make money. So how do you make money on a $30 case? You build it with $20 worth of parts. How do you make money on a $60 case? You build it with about $50 worth of parts. Now, when you start getting into these RGB and fancy painted cases, now you can start padding your profit margin by 30, 40, 50% because gamers will pay it for the cool factor, even though there's nothing practical about it whatsoever. And manufacturers love profit. So they love the gamers. And as such, they're going to put all of their focus on developing cases that have the highest profit margins. They don't want to focus on selling these cases. This is not exciting. This is business. This case is going to look as good 10 years from now as it looks today. But that lava lamp that you've got that you call your computer, you're going to be embarrassed like a high school yearbook photo when you look back at it 10 years from now. I promise you. But it's your computer, and it's important that you build it to the way you like it, not to the way I like it. And I'm here to tell you, this is what my customers order. In reality, the people who build those shiny cases with the RGB, I don't get many orders for those. That's something people generally do on their own, generally. This kind of a case for a business is what's kept me in business as long as I've been in business. That is that it provides all the upgrade path I need, that it's not an obstruction or a distraction from the workplace. It provides proper cooling that we need for that. And furthermore, it'll look just as good today as the machines I built 10 years ago. We can continue to recycle these cases by replacing the motherboard and all the internals so that the employees don't have the political drama of somebody's got a different case than me and therefore their computer is better and that's not fair and I want one and this is interfering with getting work done. So by making sure all the employees apparently have the same case because they don't know what's on the inside. This keeps that drama from ever occurring. It also keeps the business owner's expense down when they want to upgrade their machines. This case and the power supply in most instances, and if they have a DVD drive, get carried over. And we just simply replace the motherboard, CPU, processor, and RAM. And they've got a whole brand new computer and saved a few $100s in the process. And the employee, they left work on Friday night, let's say, and this was under their desk. And when they come back on Monday morning after the upgrade, this doesn't look any different to them. They still turn it on, it still boots to Windows. Everything is more or less the same for the employee. They might notice the amount of space they've got is more if we upgraded their storage, or that the performance is higher. They may even notice that the machine is quieter because the machines I build today are far quieter than the machines I was building 5 and 6 years ago. So when I tell you that I like this case, it's not for one particular reason. There's a bunch of boxes that have to get checked. And a lot of times when people say, oh, you should look at this case or that case, they're only checking 2 or 3 of the boxes. They're not checking all of the other boxes that I mentioned. I have yet to find a case that checks all these boxes that sells for the same price or less. So if you know of one, let me know. But I will be very clear to you if you weren't listening and your case doesn't check all the boxes. So be prepared. Do your homework before you speak out. But again, that doesn't mean those other cases, and I want to emphasize this, it doesn't mean those other cases are bad. It just means as somebody running a business, those are not what my clients are asking for. They're asking for a case that meets those requirements for those very reasons. I didn't make up those reasons and then tell the customer, here's your reasons. I learned the hard way. Can you imagine building a computer for a client that has all the I/O on the side, and then you go to deliver it to the client and it's up against the wall and they can't use it, and they tell you, hey man, we needed this thing yesterday. You finally bring it to us, now it's up against the wall. We can't use it. You need to put this in a different case. Get it out of here. Put it into a proper case, and we need it yesterday. And you're not going to make any extra money for that. They already paid you for the computer. So when I sound like I'm very opinionated about this, it's because I've been through the ringer on it through customers over the years. And by using a case like this, I'm ensuring that I never have to encounter that again. It's no longer a risk or a gamble. I know for a fact that scenario will never ever happen with this case. So if there's another case out there that offers all those bells, whistles, and features and design, a toolless design, at that price point or less, I'm very interested in hearing about it. Here in the case, we've got the little cardboard box. This has all of the mounting hardware, all the screws and things that we need for mounting the motherboard and any hardware we're going to put in the case. Every case comes with its own little package of hardware. And it's important that you put away any extras because in the future you're going to want to change something. So I typically will take everything that's left over from a build and place it into what will be the empty motherboard box. I'll keep all the documentation, keep everything in the one box. Put that box away. You're probably not going to need it for quite a while, but when you need it, you're really going to need it. So make sure you put it somewhere where you can find it in a couple of years. A couple other contributions have come in, so my thanks to Gio Johnson with a $10 contribution. He says, hey, congrats on 300K subscribers. I'm happy to be one of them as well. Weather is getting nice here in Michigan. Oh, don't tease me with Michigan, Gio. Cor Vandeport has contributed €5. He says, congratulations with 300,000 subscribers. Greetings from the Netherlands. Thank you, Cor. We'll make sure you're a moderator in here. Ken Schmidt with a $5 contribution says, thanks for your channel. I'm in the process of cloning my hard drive to a solid state as I write this. You gave me confidence. Oh, you're going to love that. You're going to wish you did it earlier, I promise you. Vince Morath contributed $3. Hey, Vince, thank you for supporting the channel. Make sure all these folks are moderators in here. And $20 from David Starbuck. Once again, he says, I understand about the low self-esteem. As the fat redhead kid, I was bullied. And all it took was a summer lifting weights and a couple of bullies with broken noses to get some respect. Yeah, it's really a shame that that was required. It should have never been required, but good on you that you didn't have to suffer that any longer. Carlos J with $1.99 says, Carey, play some Galaga on it. I'll play Galaga on a proper Galaga machine. Christoph S. joins us from Germany. He says, congratulations, next stop 1 million. Here's for some cookies for the dogs. Right on, Christoph. Thank you. Good to see you, my friend. Michael Martin with a £2 contribution. He says, hello, Carey. I'm still here and never too old to learn. Really, it's nothing to do with age, and it's everything to do with attitude. There are 20-year-olds with a bad attitude who don't want to do anything, and there are 90-year-olds with a bad attitude who claim they can't do anything. That's just attitude. So it sounds like you got the right attitude, Michael. Thank you for being a part of the community here. And to Ryan Grady, contributed $10, and he says, congrats on 300K. Thanks, Ryan. Ryan also, I guess, is sending a, is that you, Ryan, right? The Leon Lee case to me. There's a mid-tower Leon Lee case I had my eye on. I put it on the production wish list, and he said he's going to pick it up and send it over here for me so I can review it. John Craig with a £5 contribution. He says, I'm dead jealous. I can't get my hair cut even if it's only a very long fringe around the back of my head. Darren Clue contributes $5. He says, I hope you're having a good day, Carey. Thanks for what you do. Wonderful. Thanks to all of you guys. And then, of course, Keshav M contributed $4.99 and says, I've been a fan since middle school. Wow. And I just graduated college. Well, that doesn't make me feel old. You mentioned computers you built used to be louder. What components have gotten quieter? Okay, well, I can understand if you're that young that you weren't around to notice it, but hard drives in particular were pretty loud. They would chatter quite a bit. They'd make this loud sound. And then the fans, they would just run full speed unabated. They'd just plug right into a power supply. They were always on, full speed. There was one speed on computer fans. And then since the 3-pin fan, then the 4-pin PWM fan, those speeds are much better controlled where they're often turned off, especially on the 4-pin, not so much on the 3, but on the 4-pin fans, the BIOS has the ability to turn those fans off. And you'll notice that on modern graphics cards and on modern power supplies, that the fans may not always spin. They're now only coming on when a temperature hits a certain point. And even then, they'll come on accordingly to the speed relevant to the temperature, so that they're not just full on all the time. So the major noise was coming from computer fans, the CPU fan, the power supply fan, the graphics card fan, and the hard drives. And going to solid state drives, of course, there's no moving parts. They consume less power. They are far more reliable, and they're far more durable as far as like dropping them or knocking them over in a write cycle. They don't care. So without any moving parts, you're reducing noise. If we can get to a complete fanless build, which you can do, you can get a fanless power supply and a fanless heat sink and put it into a passively cooled case with no active cooling. You can essentially just have a completely silent computer now. It will run a little warm, but it'll be fine for most cases. Clearly not generally with a graphics card, using onboard video. But yeah, cooling passively, meaning that you've got no active fans running, that's a thing. And some people really go after that. Now, when I upgraded the graphics card here on the streaming computer to the 2070 RTX, it added a lot of noise to the startup because when you first turn the computer on, all the fans run at 100% until the BIOS initializes, and then it calms the fans down. Or in this case, the motherboard sending a signal to the graphics card saying, I got you, we're good. I would like to see that design change. I'd like to see the initial power on be a little calmer. And I'm sure that the graphics card manufacturers are getting the complaints and they will address it. And of course, if you're really pushing the graphics card hard, which let's face it, most of us don't do, but if you do, during the hardest parts of processing, those fans will crank up and get loud. But as soon as that difficult part is through, they'll calm back down again. So it doesn't stay loud. So thanks to all of you for the contributions. 806 people are watching in the chat. Where are you watching me from? Why don't you tell me where you're from here in the chat room? I love to see the worldwide reach of this channel. Is always from the guy standing in his kitchen. Got people watching me in Italy and Germany, the Netherlands and Canada, and people that live miles down the road. It's freaky. It's really freaky. When I was a kid growing up, this would have been $19 a minute. Think about that. The long distance charges alone would kill me. I guess I can get the power supply installed and get it out of the way. Just went with the cheapest power supply I could find from EVGA. This is 550 watts, which is probably 200, at least 200 watts more than we need. But if the customer wants to upgrade to a graphics card later, it's got plenty of power to handle pretty much any graphics card they want to throw in there. Look at the world showing up here in the chat room here, from Las Vegas, California, and Toronto, to Sweden, and Kalamazoo, Michigan, and Minnesota, and Tennessee, the UK, Chandler, Arizona, and New Jersey, Pittsburgh, Newcastle in the UK, and Richmond, Virginia, and Oklahoma, and Brownsville, Texas. Look at that. That just blows my mind. There's Denmark. New York City. Columbus, Ohio. Maryland. That's awesome. Thanks for letting me know where you're watching from. If you're new here, I'm originally from Michigan, so when I see folks from Michigan, it's like my brethren, I kind of give them a special shout out. Not that I particularly know them, but I have a sense that they were raised in a similar culture that I was and that we would get along fine. It's not always the case, but that is and always will be my home. But I broadcast to you from Phoenix, Arizona. And I hope soon one day to get back to Michigan and go back home and have a permanent studio there. Hopefully in a couple of years we'll get there and get out of this oppressive heat and terrible culture that is Phoenix, Arizona. Been here too long. We've got screws included with the power supply. Now we can choose to use the screws, or we can use the screws that come with the case. The power supply is one of the only components you'll buy that comes with its own mounting screws. Sometimes the power supply screws don't match the color of the case. You can still use them, but for me, the color of the case and matching screws matters, because if I'm going to put 4 screws in, and it's going to take just as long to put in off-color, silver screws as to the color matching screws, Why not take the extra 12 seconds? That's all I'm saying. And have a little pride in your work, even though it's something most customers will never ever notice. I have never once had a customer say to me, why'd you put silver screws on the black case? That's never happened. But you know what? It's never gonna happen because I ain't doing it. That's the thing. There's certain opportunity that I simply don't allow for. And that also includes certain computer build configurations where customers want something that I think will be disappointing to the customer or a nightmare to support and be rife with problems. And I've even had a customer once say to me, what do you mean you're not going to build it? Whatever happened to the customer is always right. I was like, dude, you don't go to the doctors and tell them, prescribe me some Oxycontin. They're not going to do that. And then when the doctor says, well, hold on, let me evaluate you and let me decide with my medical education what the appropriate and proper medication, if any, is needed, you don't say to the doctor, what happened to the customer was always right. Now, if I didn't have to support the computer, if what I was doing was building it and saying, here, it's your problem now, different story. However, it still would affect my reputation. Because if I build a machine that I know, that I have a hunch, this is not going to be a good experience, like X299 and Threadripper systems are a nightmare in support. I don't want to build them except for fun. I don't want to build them where I'm in a support situation. So if a customer says to me, Carey, you don't have to support it. I'll support it myself. I just want you to build it. And I build it, and it turns out to be the nightmare I said it was. Who do you think they're going to talk badly about? It still damages my reputation and the likelihood of that customer ever coming back or recommending me. And I don't do any advertising. I don't have commercials or coupons I mail out. Every bit of work you see comes from referrals. And the only way you're going to get a referral is that you do a good job. And it's real easy to do a good job. All you got to do, and listen, I'm going to tell you the secret to a successful business. You got to do two things. You got to set your customers' expectations. And by that, I mean, you tell them it's going to cost this much and it'll be ready by this day. And as long as you match the two expectations that you set, you will have a happy customer every single time. Now, there are times when that's beyond your control. If you told a customer you'd have your computer in 3 weeks and the COVID crisis hits and you can't do anything, you can't ship anything, you might end up with a pissed off customer. But at the same time, that's just circumstance. That's not your fault. But in general, because this whole COVID thing, it doesn't happen very often. In general, as long as you set your customers' expectations and then meet the expectations that you set, you will have a happy customer every single time. And that means that the only time a customer would ever be upset is where you drop the ball and it's your fault. Think about that. So the next time a customer asks you what happened to the customer is always right, you got to keep in mind, this isn't like selling a pack of gum or something where the sale is done and it's a quick 5-second transaction and you never have to take a phone call going, how do I get the gum out of the package? How do I chew the gum? Now that I've chewed the gum, what do I do with it? How do I throw it away? You don't deal with that in other types of product sales that you do with computers. And ideally, you do want the customers to call you back when they have problems because that opens up opportunity for more work and you can make money in service, after the warranty. You want them to come back to you, not because they have to, like with a lot of pre-built systems. You don't have a choice. If you want those parts, only the company makes them. And they'll often charge you so much for the part that you'll go, well, geez, for that much money, I might as well buy a new one. Well, that's exactly what they want you to do because they're gambling that you'll buy one of theirs again. I prefer customers come back to me because they want to, not because they have to. And the downside of it is I might not hear from a customer for 8 years. Carey, remember me? Nope. Well, you built this computer. Remember it had this, this, and this? Nope. When did I build it? That wasn't that long ago, a few years ago. I start looking up their name in my database. I'm like, that was 2013. Oh, I guess it's been a while. Yeah, it's been about 8 years. What's up? Well, it's starting to feel a little slow. It still runs. I just think it's time for something more modern. You still building computers? I cannot tell you how many times I've had this conversation. So I've jokingly said I need to build in some auto built-in obsolescence if things start breaking apart, so I could, because isn't that what the automobile industry supposedly does, right? I don't know if it's true, but they keep you coming back. There's plenty of computers out there to fix, though. I don't need to have one customer coming back over and over and over again. There's plenty of other customers. Over 300 million computers are sold every year. This idea that this business is dying is a joke. And there's a part of me that's like, you know what? Keep telling people the business is dying, and that way I won't have so much competition. If I'm the only guy in town, I can charge whatever I want. Anyway, I'm going to use the screws that came with the power supply. I'll tell you what I think is fascinating. EVGA makes a number of different power supply models with varying warranties, going all the way up to 10-year warranties, and different 80 plus ratings. This one, I don't see an 80 plus rating on here, which is unusual. However, I trust EVGA, and I know they stand behind their product, so I'm not too worried about. If it was anybody else, I'd be worried about it. But I give EVGA a pass on that. If that means the power supply was a few dollars less because they didn't have to pay for that 80 plus certification, I'm good with it. Now, I do have some business clients, they need that 80 plus certification for auditing purposes. So this wouldn't work for some of my business clients, but for most everybody else, it'll be fine. Some, like I say, they require that designation. In the meantime, I find it interesting that this is one of the cheapest power supplies from EVGA I could find. And it gives us the proper black screws. And yet some of the more expensive EVGA, did I call it a processor? The more expensive EVGA power supplies are coming with silver screws. I don't get it. It should be the other way around. Most modern computer cases are black or they're dark. We're generally not selling very many white or silver cases. They're available, but they don't represent the majority of the color of computer case sold. So why would you include silver screws with a black power supply to begin with? And furthermore, if you were going to do that, wouldn't you do that on your cheap power supplies, not on your expensive ones? It's a minor little nitpick. I went on Amazon and I bought a bag of like 100 of these little black screws, which is in the Amazon store link in the video notes below this video, and in like $5 for like 100 of these. And it'll take me a long time to get through 100 of them. And so when I get a power supply with silver screws, I can then either use the case screws, or the screws that came with the case, or I can go to my little baggie and I can pull out the exact screws I want. And I'm just a little amused and a little baffled why the cheap power supply has the proper screws and the expensive power supply doesn't, when all the power supplies are painted black. And I'm sure EVGA could probably explain that that's some issue with the manufacturer of who they're paying to make the power supplies. But it would seem to me that to take a little extra effort and make sure that the black screws are enclosed wouldn't be an impossible task. Or maybe they're just normal people who go, who the hell cares about the color of the screws? That's an entire possibility too. So I just put one screw in each corner. This top corner is off by about an inch, you'll see it. But everything else goes right into the corners here. Now, if you're building a computer for the first time, please do not use a cordless driver like this. It's very easy to strip the screw out to get it threaded wrong, and then, you'd have to retap the whole case, and most people aren't going to do that. Because I do this for a living, I've built thousands upon thousands of computers, and I don't want repetitive stress issues. And I also don't want to work that hard, quite frankly. I have found this amazing driver. This is the Milwaukee M4. And this thing is fast. It's got an auto off clutch. You'll see I've got it set to a setting of 3, so I don't have to worry about over tightening the screws. If you're a beginner and you're taking screws out, if you're taking something apart, cordless driver's fine. It's putting them in you want to be careful with. And I just want to put that little preface on this video because, well, I say if you're building a computer for the first time, that if you follow along with me step by step, you should expect the same results I just don't expect you to use a $150 cordless driver unless it's an investment tool for you because you're doing it for a living. If you're building one computer and you have no plans to build any more, turn the screwdriver with your hand. Be safe. I really do really like this driver. It is by far my favorite. I've had a number of them over the years on this channel. This driver actually went bad on me. I started to hear the gears grinding, and it was close to a year old. And I thought, ooh, 2 weeks under the warranty, you know? Turns out it's a 5-year warranty. So I was nowhere near getting close to the end of the warranty. And I went online to Milwaukee.com. Milwaukee's the name of the company that makes it. Filled out their online return request form, and they had me send back the driver, which is to take the battery out and to take the tip off and just send the tool back. And they sent me back a brand new in-the-box retail driver, just like this. All I had to do is put my bit back in there, put my battery back in, and we were rocking and rolling. From the time I sent it, the time I got it back, I think it was 10 days, and I had to pay for the postage to get it over there, but they paid for the postage sending it back. Great customer service, didn't have to talk to another human being. Everything was done electronically. That makes me happy. And when it comes to working in the industry, or if you're somebody who has a lot of projects you do around the house or whatever, the Milwaukee M4 battery lasts forever in it. It's got a good torque. This is a 6-inch number 2 Phillips bit that's not included. I buy those off Amazon, and I can't say enough good about it. I really, really like this driver. I like how it fits in the hand. I like that it doesn't have a light. I hate the drivers with lights on them. It just drains the battery and the lights are useless. I like it's got 2 speeds. I like, of course, that you can lock it. You can put it in the gun shape if you like that, if you prefer that. And I like that I have a battery strength meter that lights up. You can see I've got 3 out of 4 LEDs lit up there. So my battery's about between 50 and 75%. I'm imagining that's what that stands for. 3/4 full, anyway. And a link to the driver along with this little rotating table. Everything you see in my videos is all, for the most part, been purchased through Amazon. And I get a ton of emails, people asking me, where'd you get this and where'd you get that? It's already been answered. Please read the video notes, check out my Amazon store, and you'll see all the tools and all the equipment there. Okay. Documentation for the power supply, power cord for the power supply, all that will go in the motherboard box later. With the power supply installed, this can be put right over there. We can start prepping the motherboard, and to do that, I'm going to bring the camera closer so you can get a nice, clear, close-up shot of how this is done. Now, someday I hope to have a camera operator that can move around with the camera. In the meantime, I will move it manually, and you guys have to kind of hold your lunch when I do this because it's not on a gimbal. It doesn't auto level or anything, so you got to go for a little ride. Are you ready? Okay, sit tight. Keep your hands in the vehicle at all times. Women that are expecting should not be on this ride. Okay. That looks good. I know I never really went through all of the parts. I kind of stopped at the motherboard and got distracted because I'm old and old people do that. This is the RAM we're using, the Corsair Vengeance. This is 2400 speed RAM. Each stick of RAM is 16 gigs for 2 sticks of RAM, totaling 32 gigs of RAM. I've been having a hard time getting a good price on the Intel 660p 2 terabyte drive, so I've switched over to the ADATA. This is a 2 terabyte NVMe drive that should be markedly faster than the Intel drive, and it's about $20 more. This is like $250 for this 2 terabyte NVMe storage. And I think it has the same warranty as Intel, but I think it's faster. We're gonna find out. When I get it installed, we'll run a speed test on it. I bought like 4 of these, so I better like them. But they're a great price. As I mentioned before, the processors, the Intel Core i7 9700K, I think this is the bargain in CPUs right now if you're looking for particularly single core performance, which most people are using. AMD is great in multi-core performance, but that's more for creators than it is consumers. But be that as it may, whether you're choosing Intel or AMD, the installation process of everything else is exactly the same. We would use the same NVMe drive, the same power supply, the same case, the same cooler, the same RAM. We would have to use a different motherboard and a different chip if we were going AMD. Everything else would be the same. So again, as long as you're not ordering from me, I don't care what you're using. I don't care what your preference is unless you're paying me. And that's only because there's so many of you. You all have your opinions. And when customers are writing me a check, I listen to their opinions because, it's good for business. All right, enough of that. Let's set this stuff aside and we'll get the motherboard out of the box here. Got a couple SATA cables. We're not even going to use these on this build at all, I don't think. There's our board. We've got a little piece of cardboard that can go over there on the floor. And then we've got the I/O shield. And we've got the motherboard manual. You'll notice they also still give you a DVD and a Go Faster sticker, I think, is in there. You'll notice there's no little bags of screws or antennas or anything like that on this board. This is a very basic board. And the reason I like it so much, they're $100. $99 for this board. And let me show you everything you're going to get. Oh, good. They taped it closed because, if you didn't tape this bag closed, the motherboard might have escaped. Folding that and putting it in the box would not have been good enough. That's called sarcasm. Now, there's a lot of folks out there paranoid about electrostatic discharge. And I've gone over this countless times, and it's kind of, again, if you're not buying a computer from me, I really don't care what your misunderstanding of electronic discharge is, electronic static. For the customers who pay me, rest assured that I've never had, ever, been doing this 29 years, I've never had a computer damaged from electrostatic discharge. Never, ever, ever. And one of the reasons is because if you watch the way I handle the parts, there's no place for electrostatic discharge to go. When you grab a board, or any circuit board for that matter, if you hold it by its edges and don't touch any of the metal points. If I have any sort of a charge on me, it's got no place to go. There's also grounding circuits on this board. And so all the little components that are soldered onto this board are grounded onto the grounding circuits here. So what that means is when these little parts, these little transistors and such, when they're at the factory and they're in a little bin, they're very susceptible to electrostatic discharge. But once they're mounted into the circuit board has grounding circuits already on it. And granted, they're not extending to anywhere. We haven't grounded it to the case, for example. But that in and of itself makes that part far less susceptible to electrostatic discharge. And furthermore, and I want to emphasize, holding all of your parts properly negates the need for an anti-static strap. And with all that said, if you want to wear an anti-static strap, I'm not advising you not to. I'm simply stating that it's not necessary for me because I understand electrostatic discharge. I understand how it happens. I understand the misunderstanding from people who don't have basic electrical engineering degrees, and they get their whole education off the internet. And that's frightening to me because they are very bold quite often and will tell me how I'm wrong when they have no academic education in that field. So it's your computer and you should build it the way you want to. Ultimately, at the end of the day, it's your responsibility. When I build for my customers, it's my responsibility, and I'm simply turning a camera on to show you how I do it. And if you don't like the way I do it, do us both a favor and don't order a computer from me. Okay, at the end of the motherboard here, we've got our I/O ports, and you'll see we've got, and again, pay attention to how I'm holding it. If I had a static charge in me right now, it has nowhere to go. I'm going to hit the outside shield. Who cares? We got a couple USB ports here with a PS2 keyboard or mouse slot here, DVI, VGA, and HDMI out, which are going to be supplied through the graphics built into the CPU. Two more USB ports, two more USB ports, two more USB ports, gigabit Ethernet, and 7.1 surround sound, all built into this board. Look at all of the PCI expansion we've got. We've got two PCI Express 16 slots, 1, 2, 3, 4 PCI Express by, what do they call that, by one. We've got 1, 2, 3, well, we've got two M.2 sockets for two, in other words, we could put two M.2 drives. This little socket right here, this is, see how the screws right there, it's a little tiny? That's if you want to add like a laptop Wi-Fi card into this motherboard, you can do that. Yes, you can. We've got USB 3.0 header built on here, fan header, fan header, fan header, fan header. So we got 4 fan headers on here. One's for the CPU fan, so that's 3 additional. This board has everything most people want. We've got room for 4 sticks of RAM. We're only going to use 2. So if we wanted to double up our RAM, we could have 64 gigs of RAM if we bought 2 of these kits. We could even put 128 gigs if we wanted to. We could put 2 of these in and have a total of 4 terabytes of storage. And remember what I said, our graphics card is built right onto our CPU. If you look on the back or on the side, somewhere on here, it'll tell us that we've got an Intel, I don't know, what is it called, like a 630. Usually it says somewhere on the box. I'm not seeing it. It's on the specifications on the box. I think it's an Intel Graphics 630. But if you put in a discrete graphics card, if you want to put an RTX 2060, 2070, 1070, 1080, 1660, whatever you want to put in there, Radeon, AMD, Intel, not yet. Intel will have some discrete graphics cards coming out. My point is, you can put any graphics card in here you want, which you can then use both at the same time if you want to have like 6 monitors all installed at the same time. Or you can disable this one built in and strictly use a discrete graphics card for gaming. So the only thing that differentiates a gaming computer from a non-gaming computer is the graphics card. And this power supply, as I mentioned, has enough power to power most graphics cards without any issue. And we're going to use the topmost M.2 slot because I think on this motherboard, the bottom one runs at half speed. So you do get a little bit of what you pay for in the sense that a more expensive motherboard may have both of these slots running at ×4 speed. However, I don't know that most users would notice it, but be aware of that. So we're going to plug in the M.2 drive. I'm going to do that first because it's super easy. And I'm kind of anxious to take a look at this XPG from AData. It was a really good price. This is, again, the SX8100. And I don't think there's a faster drive on the market for less money as of right now in the United States. I could be wrong. So you're going to watch everything here on my videos is live. I'm not here to try to impress you. I'm not here to find a date. I'm here to show you how easy it is to build a computer. And I'm not interested in polishing up a script and doing some fancy editing and video overlay work in order to impress you. I'm here to bring you a dose of reality. And that is that you will see sometimes I misspeak, sometimes I make stupid mistakes, just like you do. And you'll see it's not a big deal. When it comes to any parts that are dead on arrival, you'll see that nothing here has been rehearsed. So this is the first time this part has been unboxed, and it's very rare that I ever get a part that doesn't work. I just noticed they give us a free heatsink. No, it's not much of a heatsink. And it's not required. These heatsinks on M.2 drives, again, we have a lot of people on the internet that are extremists. And for them, they make a bigger deal out of these things than what they really are. However, aesthetically, it's more pleasing to put to have the little heat shield on there. And it's nice that it's not pre-attached because sometimes they attach them upside down. So what we're able to do is I'll set this right here. And again, please pay attention to how I'm holding the parts all throughout this video because I do it so thoughtlessly. It, I don't take the time to point it out most of the time. It's just an automatic learned behavior. What I like what Gigabyte does here is they've enclosed the standoffs and the screws for all the M.2 slots on the board. They didn't put it in a separate package like Asus likes to do, which is just a waste of packaging. And I just think it's profoundly stupid and ecologically unwise and adds confusion to beginners, like, you know, trying to find a little bag with one little screw in it. They don't put everything in one bag. It's one screw per bag, one standoff per bag. So if this was Asus, we'd have a screw and standoff in separate bags, a screw and standoff in separate bags, and a screw and standoff in separate bags. That'd be 6 bags. It's just stupid. And then what happens 6 months from now when you can't find the stupid things and you decide you want to add another M.2 or upgrade the one you've got because prices have fallen, capacities are up? You know, Sabrent, I just did a review of Sabrent's PCIe Gen 4 M.2 drive. Sabrent's got the 4 terabyte drive out for about $800, and they've got the 8 terabyte version out for enterprises. Oh, what I wouldn't give to have that 8 terabyte drive. Now this screwdriver is a little different. This is a Japanese industrial standard screwdriver. It's made by a company called Hosan. If the camera will focus, you'll see. There it is. And this is a whole kit that's sold on Amazon for about 25 bucks. It's a much pointier tip. And for the most part, a Phillips number 2 is what we need for the majority of this build. But for the M.2 drives, they use these little teeny tiny screws. And a Phillips number 1 can work. But man, I'll tell you, this, so much better, such an improvement. And I was made aware of that by some viewers watching me using a Phillips number 1 and watching me struggle to have the driver slip out of the cross in the top of the screw head. And they're like, "You're using the wrong driver, Carey." I'd never heard of it before. Anyway, back to putting in the M.2 drive, which I accidentally just kind of rested the motherboard on, which I should not have done. However, these are not fragile. And again, I want you to pay attention to how I hold it. If I hold it this way, I'm going to put my hand on top of the chip, not across the sides where it's soldered to the circuit board. So you can hold it that way. And then the top of it, there's a sticker. You've got to leave the sticker on it because that's how it identifies the serial number and your warranty if you have any problems. So if you want to remove the sticker in order to add a heatsink because you want the best thermal heat transfer, you better not tear that sticker and put it away where you can find it if you have a warranty issue in the future. So with the label side facing up, this only goes in one direction. It's got a little cut at the top of it. You can see there's a little cut back there. And that'll prevent you from installing it upside down. It simply won't go in. And it looks like ADATA puts their sticker on the bottom, so I stand corrected. With the sticker facing up, it absolutely won't plug in because the slot doesn't align with the groove. So again, unscripted, you'll see mistakes happen. This is because I'm not familiar with this manufacturer's drive. When I use Samsung or when I use Intel, the labels always face up. And so I have mistakenly concluded that all manufacturers follow that. Obviously, that's not the case here. The good news is when we put the heat sink on, the sticker is no longer an issue with regard to heat transfer. So to put this in, let's see if I can get you a good angle. This is super, super easy. In this socket right here, this is the one we're going to use nearest to the CPU, which is right here. I'll put this in on an angle. It's going to go in sort of on an angle until I see that little gold edge. You see the gold edge? I don't want to see that gold edge. When it's seated properly, it goes in on an angle, and I push it straight in very gently, and I can no longer see the gold edge. So once again, on an angle, line it up with the slot, and gently push until it's seated. And you'll see it kind of springboards now. And that little screw I removed is going to go into that little hole, and all it does is hold the drive down. That's all it does. So you don't over tighten it, don't overdo it. We're just going to put the screw right back in there, line it up, because you'll see it wiggles left and right. So line it up so you don't have to work any harder than necessary. And when that screw comes to a stop, you can just snug it up a little bit, don't over tighten it. With that in, knowing that the motherboard's going to go into the case right side up like this, let me back the camera up a little bit here. The motherboard is going to go into the case in this direction with the CPU up. So when we want to put this little heat shield on, or this heat spreader, it's just a very thin piece of metal. It's, again, mostly just for looks. I want to make sure, because it is for looks, I'm not putting it on upside down. And I want to remind you that this case has no case window, so nobody's going to see this but the technician that's going to work on it. However, it doesn't change anything. You still want to do it right. You'll see there's a little groove cut out here, which sort of implies which way they want that to go on. There's really no wrong way to do this. You want to pretty much make it as level as possible to the edges of both sides, equal distance from both sides and from top to bottom. And then once it looks like you've got it well aligned, before you push down on it, now's your chance to make any minor corrections. And if you're good with it, then just press down on it. Now these circuit boards are flexible. This isn't 1980 anymore. These boards have flex. They're meant to flex. It's okay to flex the board a little bit. Don't overdo it. If you hear a cracking sound, you've overdone it. See, it's tips like that you don't get at other YouTube channels. All your packing material, that can go right over there. And we're done with this driver. We'll use the number 2 Phillips for everything else. On Intel box CPUs, you'll see they got a big white sticker with all this information on one side. You want to keep this for warranty reasons. But on this side, you'll see there's just a little piece of tape. So guess which side is the easiest side to open to get the CPU out? You want to cut through this thing with all the information on it. You'd have to cut along this entire line. Or you can cut this little piece of tape on the other side. Either way, you'll get the CPU out. One way's easier than the other. There's our box, documentation, and of course our Go Faster sticker. If you put that on your computer, it'll go 10% faster. And that isn't true. Here's our CPU. This is $380 in my hands. There's a cutout in one corner. Stick a thumb under there, lift it up. And you'll see 2 cutouts in the plastic holder. That's for your fingers to hold it by the edges, as I've been explaining. And you can hold this just as I'm demonstrating. Any of these ways, always hold by the edges. In one corner of the CPU, you'll see a golden triangle, which is right there. And on the circuit board here, there's usually an indicator as to the orientation of the processor. And there, if you look very closely, right there where my finger is on this plastic cover, there is another triangle. Let me see if I can zoom in a little more, and I'll move the board to you since I can't move the camera. Do you see that little triangle right where my pinky is? Can you see that little triangle? If I can find the camera. See how that lines up? So all we have to do is push this lever down and away, and then lift it up. This is a very delicate socket, so you don't want to snag your clothes, a shirt sleeve, anything like that. You'll bend these little pins. On an Intel CPU, the pins are in the socket. On an AMD CPU, the pins are on the chip itself. But you see the chip's completely flat underneath. And if you count those little landings, those little gold dots, there's 1,151 of them, making this a socket 1151. That's how that works. We're going to align that gold triangle right where my pinky is. And there's also another triangle right here on the corner of the board. Now that the cover is lifted, if we look again in that same corner on the circuit board, right there, you'll see that triangle. So we're going to align those triangles. Let's see if I can get you a good shot of this. We're going to align those by just gently placing the CPU up against the edge of the frame and then let it go. And it should just seat right into position without any frustration. What I will do is I'll give the CPU just a little, I'll grab it by the edges here and see if it twists on me. I'm not pushing down on it. Right now, those pins are not touching the bottom of the CPU. Believe it or not, they're not touching. When I lower this lid back down, and I start to bring this lever forward, it's going to have a lot of tension. And that's going to push that CPU down onto those pins. So it's important the CPU is seated properly before you push this lever down. Once I push this lever down, and just to prove to you that the CPU is being pushed down, what's going to happen is that plastic lid is going to be forced off by the CPU underneath of it. Watch. Man, that was picture perfect. Now this plastic lid is there to protect those delicate pins if there's no CPU in the board, which means if you're sending the board back for an RMA and you don't put this back on, your warranty is void. No manufacturer of motherboard will honor your warranty without this cover. And if you ship your motherboard back for RMA with your CPU in it, you may never see your CPU again because the manufacturers say don't ever do that because the people that we hire aren't trained on how to take your parts off for you, right? You send us a board, we send you a board. If you send us a board with stuff on it doesn't belong, we're keeping it. So you obviously, in that situation, would want to take your M.2 drive out, you want to take your CPU out, you want to take your RAM out, you want to return the board exactly the way that you received it from the manufacturer. That's generally how warranty works on everything, not just motherboards. We've got RAM we can put in. I guess we can, should I do that now? Let's, you know what, let's prep the heatsink. Let's do the heatsink. I love the Mugen 5 cooler. And I would love if the people at Scythe would be open to sponsorship, but they say they don't do that. But I want to change their mind because this is a company I'd be proud to have as a sponsor. I don't know how many of these I'm responsible for selling, but I'm sure it's well into the hundreds, if not thousands. But a number of people write to me and say, I changed out my cooler for the Mugen 5. Not only was it easier to install than what I had in there, it's quieter and runs better. Even had a handful of users, meaning more than one, write to me and say they've replaced their liquid cooler with one of these, and they'll never go back to liquid cooling again. This is $48.99 at Amazon. And that's its regular price. And for $48.99, I'm not saying you're getting the best cooler in the world, but you're definitely getting the best $49 cooler. And nothing compares to this as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not just talking about the cooling ability, but the ease of installation and how well thought out it is and how compatible it is with all these different CPUs. From AMD to Intel, all the way across the board, except Threadripper, this will fit. In this box, there's a bunch of parts that we need for installation on numerous platforms. There's nothing left in there. They enclose this really nice Phillips No. 2 magnetized screwdriver, which is absolutely required to install this cooler. But what's nice about it, unlike companies like Noctua who give you this throwaway, difficult to use Allen wrench, this is a screwdriver you can keep in your tool drawer that you can't tell apart from any of your other screwdrivers, except maybe the handle's a little bit short. This is a regular screwdriver that you would buy at a hardware store for putting hinges on a door. It's incredible that you get such a nice quality tool when what you were buying was a cooler. I've never seen a cooler manufacturer, not from Be Quiet, not from Noctua, not from Corsair, not from Cooler Master. I've seen nobody include such a nice driver. So I hope that we're trend setting here and that this becomes a new normal. Now, in the bag of parts, there's a bunch of these parts we're not going to use because they're for AMD CPUs. So for Intel, we need this back plate. If we were doing a socket AM4, we wouldn't use that. Socket AM4 would be an AMD, a modern AMD chip. We need 2 of these little brackets for the fan, but they give us 4 of them in case we want to add another fan to the other side as an option. I don't see any point in doing that. These screws here, they're all for AMD, so they're not going to be used at all. There's 2 brackets, 2 pairs of brackets. There's a straight pair and a bent pair of brackets. You see this bent pair? This is for AMD. We don't use these on an Intel build. And then finally, we've got this little bag of standoffs. And these standoffs are used either for Intel socket 2011 or socket 115X or even socket 1200, I imagine. I think it's socket 1200 compatible, which is the new 10th gen. And you'll see that these standoffs, you have tall ones and you have short ones. The short standoffs, kind of hard for you to see that. These short standoffs are used on the X99, X299 Intel builds, the high-end builds. We're not doing that today, so we don't use those. Those go back in the bag. And then these little 4 screws, you're going to use these regardless of whatever you're building. You definitely need those because those secure whatever series of brackets you're using. Maybe on AMD you don't use them because they've got these screws in here. So you don't always use those. I take that back. Great documentation comes with the Mugen 5. And documentation usually in tech is crappy, which is why I make videos. But you see all the different socket types that this is compatible with on the AMD side. Right across the top, there's all your different compatible socket types. On the Intel side of things, you're compatible with all of these socket types. Again, top of the page. And on the high-end Intel side, sorry, let me just hold that for a second so you can see. The instructions are just 1 page. That's all there is. And then again, like I said, on the high end, the socket 2011 and 2066 on the Intel side, which is X99, X299. And that represents the entire installation process for that chip series or socket series. Likewise, this 1 page represents the installation process for all of those sockets. Couldn't ask for better instructions, except for, I don't know, the ones I'm making for you right now to follow along with me. What remains in the box is the cooling fan itself and the heatsink, which is pretty sizable and hefty. And we'll set it here for right now. Nothing else up my sleeve. And so that can all go right over there. Okay, I gotta get a sip of my Coca-Cola, guys. Bear with me for a moment. Refreshing. Looking at what our status is going on here. Let me take a quick look since I haven't been paying attention in the chat room. We've got 1,099 viewers watching right now. Listen, guys, if you enjoy this content, you can do me a favor and you can hit the like button, which is a little thumbs up button. It kind of looks like this. And then when you click it, it turns blue. That's a nice thing to do for a content creator if you're feeling generous. And then, of course, if you've not subscribed to me, if you click the red subscribe button, and be sure you can click the bell notification so little lines go around it like that, you'll know whenever I post new content. A lot of times people want to know when I go live. I don't have a schedule at this time. I go live as time permits. So between now and whenever I get a schedule, the only way to know if I'm live basically is to receive those notifications. And the only way you get the notifications is by subscribing. The more subscribers I have, the more interested sponsors become. So I appreciate if you guys want to be a part of this channel growing. It requires a little bit of participation from you. If you could care less, well then that's fine too. But just so you know, I'm going to grab a Ziploc bag just an ordinary Ziploc bag, and I'm going to put all of the parts for the cooler that we're not using in this bag, and it's going to go to the customer because, hey, maybe the customer, wants to change the cooler out and use this on an AMD system, or maybe they want to upgrade to an AMD system in the future. Who knows? It doesn't do me any good to hold on to these parts. It doesn't do me any benefit to have them. So they should go to the customer. And if you are building your own, you should put the parts away for yourself because you just never know when you might need them. I've done a couple of repairs here where the customer was not given the spare parts that were taken out. And as a result, we had to go and order new ones online, which isn't the end of the world, but it's just money that was spent and time that was delaying the repair for something that should have been returned to the customer the whole time. In this case, I'm referring to a back CPU bracket on an AMD build where a Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo cooler was used with its own backplate, and the tech did not give the customer back the original backplate. So when we went to switch out their Hyper 212 with a Mugen 5, on the AMD side, the Mugen 5 uses the backplate that comes with the motherboard, but that was not returned to the customer. So we had to go online and order one, and they're like $7 to $10, and it took about 4 or 5 days to arrive in the mail. But if, what is somebody going to do with that backplate? What's the point in keeping it and not giving it to the customer? In a perfect world, the customer would never need it. But it's better to never need it and have it than to need it and not have it. I think you would agree, especially when it costs you nothing and it benefits you in no way to keep it. Keep it out of the landfill too. So all these parts here, these are all going to be going to the customer. So this is all it takes to install this cooler, just this little bit of parts here. And we're going to start by putting the back plate in. And this back plate, because it's compatible with so many different Intel socket types, it's got a number of holes in each corner. You'll see there's 3 holes. And for socket 1151, which is what we're building with today, we're going to use the middle hole. You'll also see holes here. See, there's 2 holes up here at the top. Those are going to align, guess where? This is going to go over this area, and it can go on any of 4 different ways. It is intended, although it's not critical, it is intended for you to align those 2 holes over those 2 screw nubs that are kind of, nubs is that thing? They're kind of sticking out. And in order to avoid putting this on upside down, they've put foam pads so that this metal won't hit the metal on the back of the motherboard, causing a short circuit. So the foam pads go towards the back of the board, aligned so that the holes, those little screws can kind of poke through the holes. And what I have to do, this is the hardest part, and again, pay attention to how I'm holding this motherboard, if you would, please. I have to hold that back plate in position, and I'm trying to do this while showing you, which adds another level of complexity to what is really a slight challenge, but this is making it more difficult. What I've got to do is take one of these standoffs, place it through one of these holes, it doesn't matter, just any one of the 4 holes surrounding the CPU, and I want that to align with the center hole. Again, I'm going to try and show this to you. When this is aligned properly, we want to be in the center hole, which is right there. You can kind of see the silver on the screw kind of coming through. And I'm only going to give it 2 or 3 little turns just to sort of hold that in for me. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the opposite corner, which is to just take another one of these standoffs. We're going to go back through the, if we went into this corner, we want to go to the opposite corner all the way over here. And then again, you're going to need you can see how it's still flopping around back here. And the reason we're going to the opposite corner is once we align the 2 standoffs at opposite sides, we no longer have to assist that back plate with positioning. The back plate will stay in the proper positioning so that the final 2 standoffs will automatically align with the center holes. So it makes your life a lot easier, especially when you're working alone with an assistant that doesn't have opposable thumbs. Right, Jimmy? You guys haven't seen my assistant without opposable thumbs? He's right over here. Come here. If only you had opposable thumbs, I could put you to work. But you get dog slobber over all my computer parts. You're a good boy, though. Yeah, you're a good boy. Is there Bwains in there? Is that Bwain? Hi, Bwain. Show me your non-opposable paw. Scruffy. So petting the dog is a great way to get static buildup, and not ideal for a computer building. And one way you can dissipate any electrostatic buildup is by touching anything metal. Doesn't have to be plugged in, just touching anything metal that gets you on the same electrical level as everything else in your environment, which is very different from an earth ground. And a lot of people on the internet don't understand the difference between an earth ground and protecting themselves from electrostatic discharge, which I find profoundly sad. And no matter how many times I say it, it's never enough. But anyway, I'm going to now secure those 4 standoffs using the enclosed driver that Scythe has given us with the, or not given us, but has come included with the cost of the cooler. And we're going to just tighten these all down. And you'll see I go opposite corners because I want that back plate to be tightened equally around all the edges. You don't want to tighten one side and then tighten the other side because it could end up warping it a little bit. And it's not always a warpage that you can see with the human eye. It just means things won't quite sit right and you'll not quite understand why. It'll always be a puzzle to you. So for that reason, when it comes only to the cooler, we always want to tighten everything in opposite corners, just like putting on a tire on a car. If you've ever watched, like if you don't know how to do that, watch how they do it. They always go in what we call a star pattern. They go opposite. And that prevents the tire rim from getting warped. And then that affects the ability of you driving straight without constant correction, as well as the overall comfort of the ride. Kind of the same thing. Now we've got the brackets to put on. Now these brackets, we could put them on this way, or we could even flip it upside down and put it on that way. But just because you can put it on that way doesn't mean you should, and doesn't mean it's going to work. So to put this on the correct way, we want it so that the little bump in the bracket is facing up. And this lever that we used to install the CPU, this bracket is going to go over the top of that lever. And of course, that means if we ever need to take the CPU out, we have to remove this bracket off this side. The other bracket is going to go on exactly the opposite so that it's completely symmetrical. Once again, we can use the enclosed driver. And there are, and I want to point out again, there are 4 different positions these screws can go in. And that's for different socket types. For this socket type, we're going to go all the way to the last hole there. And we go closest to the CPU. And these screws go right into the top of the standoffs that we just secured with the driver. And the screws will come to a dead stop. Once you get to a certain point, they just don't go any further. So you really don't have to worry about over tightening. They just stop turning, and that's as far as they go. You'll see that driver's magnetized. It's holding the screw on the end there for us. Magnetized screwdrivers are not only not dangerous, they're practically required to build a computer. So don't be afraid of that. Now, back in the 80s, it was something to be worried about because of floppy disk and magnetic-based media. We don't use that stuff anymore. So magnets are fine, just fine. So I was going back to the chat room before I distracted myself. I'm really good at that. Paul Carroll contributed $5. Hey, Paul, thank you. David Starbuck with another $20 contribution. Thanks for your generosity tonight, David. John Wilson also with a $20 contribution. John's been a wonderful and frequent supporter here of the channel. Thank you so much, John. He says, this is for support of the best damn tech channel on YouTube. Flattery will get you everywhere, my friend. David Starbuck again with another $20 contribution. He says, thanks, John Young. Yes, for the cause. I'm working my way backwards here. So the previous contribution was from John Young at $10, and he says, this is for the cause. I've got an image of The Fifth Element where Gary Oldman, which coincidentally does kind of sound like Carey Holzman, is negotiating giving the, I forgot what they were called, the aliens, the guns that he had. Wow, my brain's not working tonight. And he says, we'll give them one crate for the cause. Although it sounds like he says for the course, but he says for the cause. Turn to closed captioning on. Bill Ottinger's contributed $10. He says, Carey, been out for a while, but here's $10 for whatever you want to do with it. All right. Thank you, Bill. Irving T joins us all the way from France, has contributed €5. He says, Carey, congratulations with 300,000 subscribers. Well, Irving, thank you for being one of those 300,000 subscribers for a long time. Speaking of which, another person I'm proud to call my friend and frequent contributor here on the channel is John Yasuda. John just contributed $20 and he says, congrats on 300K. Have some Coke and chips on me. Great job as always, Carey. Well, you guys are very kind. Thank you. Paul Stallion 43 with a $5 contribution says, thanks for all you do. Also, thank you for keeping it super simple. KISS, LOL. Keshev M contributed $4.99. And that one I mentioned earlier, he was the one asking about what parts have gotten quieter. Dale Maluk has contributed $20. Well, some really nice contributions tonight. Thanks, you guys. Navy Retired contributed $2 and says, have a Coke on me. Okay? Okay. Well, twist my arm. Paul Carroll with another $2 contribution. He says, previous donation was for cookies for the doggies. Right on. And another $20 contribution. David appears to be matching the $20 contributions. David Starbuck. And he's saying to Dale Maluk, thank you on my behalf. Now that is what I'm flattered. It's not often I can't find the words. So I really appreciate that, David. That means a lot to me. Thank you. 1,169 people are watching live around the world right now. And we're just finishing up prepping this motherboard for what is essentially a very cost-effective, high-performance build. And it is the most requested build from actual customers who call me and say, take my money. They want this more than they want anything else. And I don't blame them. If I had a limited amount of money and I wanted to do it right and not worry about it for the next, at least 8 years, this is what I would build. I forgot that these motherboards from Gigabyte, they have this extra mounting hole. I was going to say mounting post. And you don't, on the Corsair 200R, there's no mounting point for this hole right here. I don't know if you guys can see it. It's this hole right down here. It's not normal. And I have some little plastic standoffs. I want to put one in there right now while I'm thinking about it. I have them left over from the 90s when we used to use these little plastic standoffs. If I didn't have them, I wouldn't worry about it. But I'm solving two little problems here. One, I'm getting rid of these damn things. And two, it adds a little extra support to the board, even though it is absolutely not required. It doesn't hurt to have it if you got one laying around. But I wouldn't necessarily say, go on Amazon and buy one, because you got to buy like 50 or 100 of them at a time. And it's something you just need one of. And you don't really need it. But because I have them, I'll use them. And this is what they look like. And back in the day, maybe I'll get an old motherboard or an old computer in here and I can take it apart. But these used to slide into slots on the back of the motherboard tray, and it would just lock down, and it moved down about a ½ inch and lock down. And then 1 or 2 screws would actually secure the board. What I do is I cut the little nub off the end of it. I just get my wire cutters that are flush, and I cut the end off. I usually catch it in my hand because it'll jump across the room. And by cutting the nub off, I end up with a flat surface now on the top. Kind of like when you order a pizza and they have that little plastic piece that keeps the cardboard, the pizza box from hitting the top of your pizza. That's all this is, smaller scale. And we'll just push it into the hole, it locks in, just like that. Again, not required. I've got them, I use it. If I didn't have them, I wouldn't worry about it. You just wouldn't put anything in there. The only case manufacturer I know of that supports that specific mounting hole is Gigabyte. The people that make the motherboard. I don't know why Gigabyte does this. They've done that with a couple of things where they just make up their own rules or they follow a standard. I suppose it's an official standard. It's just that nobody else really does that. And I don't see the point in, exactly how much extra support, because you don't have an equal hole here or here. So why is it important to put one there? I don't know why Gigabyte did that. And why it concerns me, there's a number of people out there building computers for the first time, and they feel like they're doing something wrong. If there's nothing there's clearly a mounting there, why isn't it lining up? What have I done wrong? Well, you've done nothing wrong. It's just the way Gigabyte did it, and it adds unnecessary confusion to novices' first-time building experiences. And that's why I go on and on about it. It seems stupid, unnecessary. Now there's a power connector up here I've got to hook up. But what'll happen is when I put this heatsink on, and this gets mounted into the case, so this is kind of going to go on like this. And I'm going to set it on there right now, just rest it in place. For me to have to reach between the top of the case to plug a cable in right there on this Corsair 200R is quite a challenge. So I have learned the hard way live on this channel and numerous other videos, because I'm also a slow learner, that I should hook up that power connector before I put the heatsink on. I used to get into a habit of prepping the entire motherboard with RAM and the cooler and then just slap it all in at once. And as the parts have evolved and developed, my technique has also got to adapt to that, because I'm working way too hard some days. Not hard enough on other days, but we're not talking about that right now. Thanks to all of you in the chat. Thanks for keeping it civil in there. I have to tell you, that all those, hold on, let me adjust this a little more. All those names you see in blue, what used to happen when I would go live is there would be people who were intent on disrupting the broadcast. And it's a lot of work for me to both convey the instructional how-to as well as the why I do it, so that you aren't just a robot, but you can think on your own. While at the same time making sure I'm in the frame of the camera, because I don't have a camera operator, make sure the batteries are all good on my audio's going out, my connection to the internet is solid. And then I got all this stuff going on in the chat room, which is distracting viewers from my content. And it was getting out of control. And what these friends in blue are doing for me is, whenever anybody set on coming in here to disrupt makes any minor attempt to either spam or disparage or in any way poison the community, they get snuffed out real quick here. And I can't tell you how important that is, because a lot of the stress and anxiety I used to have about going live, about basically getting ready to defend myself, I've now been able to hand over my shield that I was using to defend myself over to my friends in blue, so I can better focus on the content and not worry about what's going on out there, that I trust them, that they're not going to, cost me viewers. And you guys are doing such a good job. It occurred to me the other night that stress and anxiety of having to defend myself is nearly zero now. Like I almost don't even worry about it anymore. And even when I glance over at the chat room, you guys are either snuffing it out so quickly I don't see it, or you have discouraged them so much that they don't even bother trying anymore. And for that, I can't thank you enough, because that was my number one reason when it came time to do a video. That was my number one reason for not doing it. Am I in the mood right now to have to defend myself against a bunch of lowlifes with nothing else better to do? And the fact that you've taken that off my shoulders brings the joy and the fun back to this. It's always fun, but that part of it was getting to a point where there was a serious consideration of whether or not I wanted to go live, if I had the stamina and the wherewithal that day to deal with having to defend myself unnecessarily from unwarranted attacks from people who voluntarily click on the video. and my heartfelt thanks to all you guys for encouraging the proper behavior and making this a safe place, so that as this channel grows, it becomes more appealing for spammers to ride on the coattails, to promote their products, to send up links, hey, come see my channel, all that other stuff, even from other YouTube content creators. So my thanks to you guys, because that's huge. And I think something just got delivered. No, not yet. I have a case coming, because a computer case. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock, my good friend and inspiration is a gentleman named Steve Bass. Steve's going to join us tomorrow at 3 o'clock Pacific time, and I've sent him some items to review, and I've also sent him some computer parts. I also sent myself the same computer parts, and together we're going to build side by side. He's 300, 400 miles away from me, and I'm going to show Steve through Skype, and you guys are going to eavesdrop on it. Here's where you put this screw, and here's where you do this. And he's going to build his own computer. I'm going to build the identical computer, exactly identical, right along with him. And never done anything like this before. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm so excited that Steve was game to join me on this interesting little adventure. And it'll be an AMD system. We are building AMD. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. But that's not tomorrow. So tomorrow Steve's joining, and we're going to talk about, there's a keyboard I've sent, or a mouse I've sent, the Streamlight flashlight, and something else he's reviewing. Then he's also reviewing the Casa from TP-Link. You can have like smart plugs. You can turn things that are plugged in on or off via an app on your phone. You can control the lights. They have like smart lights and stuff like this. He's going to review that, but that's probably going to be a whole show on its own, because there's a lot to talk about there. Steve was previously using the X10 system from 30 or 40 years ago, and I'm interested in if he thinks this is a great step forward, or does he like the X10, the old obsolete X10 system, which he has obviously stuck with for years because he's not found anything better. And then, of course, there's the PC build, which will be its own video. So what I'm guessing is going to happen right now is he'll join us tomorrow to do the review on the keyboard, the mouse. There's a Bluetooth speaker and a flashlight. We'll spend about 15 minutes apiece on each one of those items and his overview and review of those items. And that'll be an hour show. That'll be it. The next time he comes back, we're going to do the computer build together. And then the next time he comes back, we're going to talk about the Casa system from TP-Link, the smart lighting system. And so we've got the next, about 6 weeks. If Steve joins us every other week, that'll be the next 3 appearances from Steve Bass. I hope you'll join us. It's always fun, and Steve's got a great sense of humor, and he's just a regular, ordinary guy like the rest of us, and he's a very good communicator in describing his frustrations with technology that you might think, other people don't suffer from because everybody else gets it but you. No, it's not just you. And it's great to have that voice, to speak on behalf of the everyday user. Although Steve was a very technical person, he's always had that skill to be able to speak conversationally in a relatable fashion that wasn't just appreciated by technical people. And that's why I'm so excited to have him pulling him out of retirement and putting him back to work. Because even to this day, there's not very many people like him. All right, he might be watching this, and I don't want him to get, you know, I don't want to flatter him too much. Might raise his price. I'm just moving some stuff around to make some room for the installation of the board. I've got the I/O shield still to put in. This is the I/O shield. I don't know why they put it in a bag, but they all do this. This comes with the motherboard. It is unique to the board. It's highly unlikely that if you have one of these laying around, it will work with some new boards you've got. And this has to go in before the motherboard. A couple other contributions have come in here, so quick shout out and thank you to, let's see, I missed quite a few. Joseph Hawkins has contributed $5 New Zealand dollars. He said, here's my support. What has happened to your Coke? The Coke's back there. Dom Parada has contributed $4.99. Sharon Idle has contributed £2 and says, well done on the 300K. Thanks, Sharon. Donald Strickland has contributed $14.99. He says, here's for keeping it going. Thank you, Donald. Diane Glue with a $2 contribution. W. Trexel contributed $5. He says, here's a little something for your fur babies, and congrats on 300,000 watchers. David Starbuck with another generous $20 contribution is saying thank you to Donald and to keep it going, everyone. Mark Stevens with a $10 contribution and said, that's because you make us feel like family. If you were part of my family, you wouldn't want to feel like it. David Starbuck has contributed $20. And he says, Mark, we are family. You guys are getting all touchy-feely on me. Eduardo Tehran has contributed 50 pesos, Mexican pesos. He says, I acquired the Corsair 100R case, and I'm glad of the easy cable management job. I'm learning more on every PC build live. Congrats for the 300K. Thank you, Eduardo. Of course, David Starbuck, Mark Stevens, W. Trexel, Diane Glue, Donald Strickland, Sharon Idle, Dom Perota, Joseph Hawkins. Thanks, you guys, for allowing me to continue free of any sponsorships. And a $50 contribution from David Starbuck today. He says, thank you, Eduardo. And the Dodge Whisperer contributed $5. He says, thanks for the great content. Howdy from Wimberley, Texas. Right on, Dodge Whisperer. And David, thank you so much for your generosity today. It's very, very much appreciated. And also Colin Hilton and John Wilson and David Hale. These are guys. Peter Laycock. These are folks that have made some very generous contributions, not only this month, but in months in the past. And I always want to, when I think about it, give them shouts out. David Stetzel. And there was just one the other day, Benjamin Decour. Ben, thank you so much again for your generosity as well. Sometimes I get contributions through PayPal that I don't see until I'm offline. And I always send a thank you email to anybody who contributes through PayPal. And it is my intent to also give them a shout out on the next live video, but I don't always remember to do that. And I always feel terrible about it. So I need to come up with a new system so that people get the proper credit. Dale Maluk has contributed $50. Right on. He goes, here's for some Coke and treats for the dog. Well, that's a lot of Coke and treats. Thank you, Dale. And the Surly Sasquatch has contributed, and it just scrolled off my page. Where is it? He says, here's a $5 good night donation. Hopefully I'll be back to at least regular lurking soon. Farming ramp up is brutal. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be a farmer. That's too much work. And David Starbuck just matched Dale Maluk's contribution with $50 and says, thank you, Dale. That's like $600 in contributions during today's live feed. That almost pays for this whole system. That's amazing. Although YouTube's going to take 30% of that. But that's all right. I really appreciate your generosity. And I got no excuse to keeping new builds coming as long as the the viewers are so supportive like you guys, and this is the content you want to see, I may be in a position, if this keeps up, we might have to start giving away some of these computers or offering them to some of my biggest contributors, give them first shot at it, because some of these folks that are very generous, I don't know, I want to do something in return for them. So maybe there'll be a couple of builds that we do just to do. And if you're one of those contributors and you're interested in having one of those, I'd be happy to send one to you. Folks like David Starbuck, Peter Laycock, Colin Hill, the people that have contributed substantially to the channel. I want to give first dibs at any future builds I'm able to do because of their generosity. And for everybody else, you know, the good news is only a handful of people that are potentially available, qualified for that option. And then once there's a, hey, we're good, you know, maybe I've already sent them one, or maybe they don't need one, then I'll work my way down to regular contributors, and we'll figure out a way to find out who would benefit most from that. And then, of course, I still have about 20 plus, more than 20 is what I'm trying to say, computers to give away, not only to disabled American veterans, but also to some of my viewers who perhaps are financially in a tight place and could use a better computer, in the hopes that they'll use it to continue to watch my videos and participate in the chat room. So we have lots of giveaways coming up as well, which again, not possible without the support and contributions from you guys, because again, there's no sponsors paying for any of this. And it's quite often the shipping that kills me. It's the shipping that's the most expensive part. In many of these you know, older computers, it's an average of about $90 to ship those. Okay, putting the I/O shield in. This is just a friction fit. I'm going to turn the case right like so. We've got this big cutout right here. And what I have to do is just reach in. I align it with the little holes for the speaker output facing towards the bottom. And I'm just going to align one corner. Just get one corner in there. And then make sure that when you put the one corner in, that this bottom ledge is also lined up against the bottom of the case. You'll see the fan cable here can get in the way, so you want to move that out of the way, make your life a little easier. Once I get that corner aligned, I'll push the other corner in, and then I'll move up, I'll go up to the top, do another corner, and then the last corner, and then I just double check to make sure none of the other corners have popped out in the process. See, you just heard it click. You can even feel the edge, make sure that's sticking out. Looks good. That's our I/O shield installed. As I mentioned, the motherboard has CPU power that's got to get hooked up. And you'll notice I haven't even opened this box of screws and stuff, which we're going to need to mount the motherboard to secure it. But I'm going to move all this off of the case so I have some room to work. Just set it over here. What else can I move out of the way? We won't need this. We don't need this. We don't need this. I'll put all that over here. That's all going to go in the empty motherboard box when I'm done. And so what I've got to do is, out of all these cables, there's one that's an 8-pin, not to be confused with this one. This is for the CPU power. Not CPU, I'm sorry. This, I was looking at the chat. I see another very generous contribution from David Starbuck. He's writing to Paul Carroll. He says, I got you, bud. Carey, if you build a system with this money, please donate it to a person in need. Thank you. Well, there you go. You guys can thank David Starbuck, amongst others like John Wilson and Peter Laycock and David Hale, David Stetzel, Benjamin DeCour, Stephen Bernstein. All these guys are going to make that possible very soon. So of all the cables, and again, I'm not using a modular power supply because the case has no window and people lose their cables. This is going to keep everything together. This is for a graphics card. These connectors that say PCIe, we don't have a graphics card in this build, but if we were going to add one at a later date, we're ready for it. The reason I mention it is it looks very similar to the connector I'm looking for, which is the CPU power connector. which is right here, and it says CPU. Yeah. Hold on a second. Yeah, that was the computer part I was expecting. Okay. And Lyle's decided it's time to eat boxes. What are you doing, boy? You're gonna get those boxes? Is this, what about this? All boxes must die. Hey, fluffy butt. Come here. Well, it's a little past their dinner time, so bear with me for a minute. Let me give them some food. Are you hungry? Are you guys hungry? Let's see, what will we have today? I know. How about dog food? Is that your favorite? That's a good boy. And 1 cup of dog food for Jimmy. Let's see if we can focus over on Jimmy. Brizzy. There he is. Are you hungry? Are you ready? Are you ready for your dinner? Gonna have a paw. Oh, I got both paws. Good boy. All right. Thanks for bearing with me while I feed my beasts. All right, where was I? Guess that's as far back as I can bring that. You'll notice I have not yet installed the RAM. I will wait until the motherboard's installed because the RAM just is going to push on. And we'll also, as I previously mentioned, we'll put the cooler on after the motherboard's installed. This is a difficult thing for me to film for you guys because I have to set the case flat. Now, all of the standoffs that are placed in the Corsair 200R are already located where we need them to be. So if you're following along with me using a similar motherboard in this case, you don't have to worry about moving any of the standoffs. But if you're building anything else, you've got to pay particular attention to the location of the standoffs, because you don't want a standoff where there's not a matching hole in the motherboard, and you don't want a hole in the motherboard that doesn't have a standoff, with that one exception I pointed out earlier that is unique to Gigabyte only. But given a choice of the two, you can live with a mounting hole that doesn't have a screw in it. But what you can't live with is a standoff that's hitting the back of your motherboard that you can't see because there's no mounting hole there, and it's potentially causing a short and could fry your whole computer. So it's something very simple, and all you have to do really is count the holes on your motherboard. How many holes do you have for mounting points, and then count how many standoffs. And if there's a discrepancy in that number, find where the discrepancy is. If it falls underneath the motherboard, you want to remove it. This is not an issue with this motherboard. In this case, it's going to align perfectly. The standoffs are already pre-installed in the right positions. And the dogs are looking at me for their cookies. Okay, I get it. You want cookies. Let's see what we've got. Hold on. One last thing to take care of for the boys here. Oh, you're so excited. Oh, I know what you can have today. Extra special day today for you guys. Let's come around here. Some chicken jerky. Don't take my finger. Chomp. What about you, Cocoa Puff? Come here. Come here, Jimmy. Come here. Chomp. You ready for another one? Can I have a paw? Can I have the other paw? Good boy. Good boy. What about you? Come here. Sit. Paw. Can I have the other one? Good boy. Good boy. All right. Get out of here. Okay. I see David Starbuck being extraordinarily generous in the chat room. Let me just wash this chicken jerky off my fingers. Apparently today's show is being brought to you by David Starbuck, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, David. Okay. What have I missed? Andrew Brockington's contributed $5. Hey, Andrew, thank you for that. And David Starbuck with a $50. Oh, that's the one I mentioned already. David Griswold with a $5 contribution said I had to join the train. Keep up the great work. Arvid Viltreras has contributed 1,000 Norwegian krona. That's an interesting amount because to USD, that's nearly $100. That's $98.41 US. That's very generous. And I'm sure I'm mispronouncing your name. Arvid Valeros. I believe that's how it's pronounced. Thank you for such a generous contribution. Michael Dane then contributed $20. He says, here's $20 for your computer needs. And by the way, thank you for the birthday wish. Oh, right on. Friends that are join me on Facebook, I always give them all a shout out on their birthday. Kurt Keegans has contributed $50. Unheard of generosity today. Thanks, you guys. He says, use this for a system to donate to a deserving person. Yes, sir. David Starbuck with a $100 contribution says, thanks, Arvid. I had to look up the conversion. Right on. Then he follows it up with another $20 contribution. David does. Says, thanks, Michael. Of course, that's from Michael Dane, matching his contribution. Mira Ora contributed $2 and said, those dogs have their human well trained. Yeah, you think? And then David Starbuck matches Kurt's contribution of $50 with his own $50 contribution. That's bringing up today's chat revenue for the first time ever. It's broken $1,000. Much of that thanks to David Starbuck matching all the other generosity. That's never happened before. I definitely think there's revenue there to build a machine to give away now. So I was thinking it was going to happen over time, after a few live shows. But now you've pretty much nipped that in the bud. So we'll find a new system to build that's going to go to somebody very lucky. They obviously have to be in the United States because of the shipping issues and tariffs, taxes, and such, plus potential for damage. But you've got that to look forward to. All right, so now I was getting the motherboard installed. Let's take care of that now. With the I/O here, right here's the I/O shield. We're going to grab the motherboard. Once again, I'm going to kind of step in front of the camera for a moment. Hold the motherboard by the edges. And I'm going to set the motherboard down on an angle. I'm going to go in sort of with the front, or the back of the board where all the I/O is, facing down on an angle. And I'm going to gently lay it down so I can get the fan cable out of the way, because this rear case fan, the cable can get in your way. It's just 4 screws if you need to take it out. Some motherboards have covers over the I/O that can get right underneath that fan and make it difficult to install. There's also these little grounding straps. You can't really see it down here where my finger is, but I want to make sure that grounding strap is lifted up a bit because I don't want it to fold under and block the port to whatever that is. I think that's the, is that the Ethernet port? No, I think that's the USB. Nothing, nothing sucks worse than you go through the effort of lining your motherboard up and you secure it, excuse me, only to realize long after you've moved on and done everything else that you got to plug something into this port here and this metal piece is blocking it. You've got to take the whole board back out again just to bend up on that piece. So watch that during your motherboard install. It's really super easy to build a computer. The devil is in all these little details like the standoffs being on the right place or that little metal grounding strap being lifted up. This is not rocket science. And as long as you pay attention to a couple of these little details, you will be successful in building your computer the first time. And if you're not successful the first time, don't panic. That's how learning happens. It's okay. Chances are you didn't permanently damage anything. And while it might raise your anxiety level a little bit, it makes the reward that much sweeter when you are successful and you have a lesson that you won't soon forget. So don't worry about not doing it right. Nothing wrong with not doing it right, because that means you're learning. You might think you're learning by watching my videos, but in fact, all I'm doing is giving you ideas. Until you get your elbows deep into hardware, you only have theory. So put that into practical application and have experience. That's where the learning takes place. Now I'm going to line this motherboard up, the ports here with the holes in the I/O shield, and I'm going to push it forward this way. And there's a little post on the center standoff that's going to hold the motherboard into position for us so it won't shift around. And now we can secure the motherboard with the screws that were included in the case that are in this box right here. Now this box includes screws for mounting hardware here and mounting hardware here. Even though I mentioned screws are not entirely necessary, they are available if you want to secure that down. They've also given us some nylon zip ties. You can't really see what I've dumped out here. Let me lower this down a little bit more. I think I got everything out of this box. Is there anything else in there? Sometimes there's another nylon zip tie in there. Nope, got it all. So we'll set the nylon zip ties aside. These long screws are for adding another fan to the front of the case, which I don't need. There's extra standoffs for different motherboard requirements. And Lyle is taking a box. What are you doing, boy? You don't normally see the streaming computer that's sitting on the floor. You brat. These are more screws for adding more case fans. We don't need that. Then there are these 2 bags of screws left. One has a coarse threaded short screw, which on the Corsair cases is used to mount the motherboard. The others look very similar. They're a little bit longer and they have a finer thread. These are often used to mount 2.5-inch solid state drives and optical drives, card readers. Because we're not installing any of that, we won't use any of this. We just need a few screws out of this bag. It looks like this motherboard has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mounting points that we're going to use. So we'll pull out 5 screws. I do want to remind you, if you're a first-time builder, tighten all your screws by hand. I'm an experienced builder. I build a lot of computers. I'm going to be using my cordless driver with a torque setting set on 3. There's no specific order. You don't have to go on a star pattern or anything like that with the motherboard. But I do recommend you don't tighten the screws down. Just get them started so that you can wiggle the board as needed for all of the holes to line up with the standoffs underneath. The board may be sitting sort of on an angle and it may not be obvious to you until you try to put a screw in and you find out it's not going in because it's not lining up properly with the standoff. And so this way you can sort of nudge the board in different directions until it aligns. And if you tighten the screws down, the board won't nudge and then you won't be able to align it. So just give them a couple of turns. If you're turning them by hand, just get the screws started until you get all of them in there. last one right here. And that one goes right here. Now I can tighten them down. You'll hear the driver auto shut off when it hits that torque setting. Okay. So that is what the motherboard looks like when it is mounted properly into the case. And I'm kind of sitting on these power cables right now, so I don't want to tip it over. So you want to make sure we get all the cables out from underneath of it. The rest of these screws, we're going to put all these away because, again, in future upgrades, you're going to need those screws that are specific to this case. Now, I mentioned that power connector that's right up there. Now, then the heatsink, if you can imagine that big heatsink right here, it makes it very difficult to reach up into that corner. So that's why I want to do that now. So this, as I mentioned earlier, this is our CPU power cable, and I just want to untangle it. And furthermore, you can see I've got this little space. This power supply is a bit shallow, which is nice because it gives us that little space right there, and I might be able to use it. No, it's not quite big enough, is it? Or is it? Wait a minute, we might be getting somewhere here. And that just really helps to hide the cabling. See, that's coming through the other side here. Pull it all the way through, and it's going to go right up into this corner. Now look, if you really wanted to, you could just plug this cable right in. But I want to make it look pretty. Even though there's no case window, I still want to make it, still take a lot of pride in my work. And I also know this makes the computer easier to work on when the cables aren't in your way. So this gets the cables out of the way. And if the customer were to ever take the side panel off, they'll be impressed. Even if they don't know what they're looking at, they'll say, well, it looks clean. Sometimes they even go, where are the wires? They don't even see them. That's the best compliment ever. I'm going to push these two connectors together. The clip is going to go on the outside edge, and it just pushes on like that. If you want to make sure it's on, just give it a light tug. If it falls off, it wasn't on all the way. Rocket science, right? That's what that looks like. And then we can pull the slack from the other side. We'll do that later when we're doing the cable management. And you'll see that pretty much hides that cable. You don't even see it. Next to it, right up in this corner on this motherboard, as I recall, there's a fan header right up there, which is also very difficult to get to once the heatsink is in place. But it's a great location to plug this rear fan in. And if we do it now, it's super easy. If we do it later, not so much. I want to take this wire tie off. You don't want any wire ties left in the computer. We want to replace it with a nylon zip tie. And Corsair's given us about 6 of these with the case. You're going to need more than 6, but there's 6 less that you're going to need, right? Pretty much the way Corsair's given it to us is pretty well perfect. And all I'm going to do is take a nylon zip tie and tie that up right at one end and again on the other end. And Lyle's back at it with the box. Well, I kind of screwed that one up. I really wanted that to go underneath these other cables. Do be careful if you're going to cut away your nylon zip ties that you don't cut into your cables. That would not be good. I can always keep the cutters flat, and that way I'm ensuring that I don't go through those cables, and I can get rid of this one I just screwed up. We'll get rid of those. I frequently will put a zip tie on that I regret putting on, or for whatever reason. So I will go through a lot of zip ties during the cable management process. This is one of those cables that you better get to now before the build is completed, or it'll be very difficult to do later. But for the most part, I will save my cable management for after I verified everything I've done is working correctly as it should. I can raise this up a little bit more. So this is going to go right up in this top corner. And again, it's very difficult to see because I can barely see it. It only goes on in one direction. And this is only a 3-pin fan, but it's a 4-pin fan header. And it's got a little groove and a notch so that it only aligns properly with the proper 3 out of the 4 pins. So you cannot get it wrong. Now we can put the heatsink on top of the CPU. And the first thing I want to do is put the thermal compound, the thermal material, on the CPU. Don't put it on the heatsink, you put it on the CPU. If you're using a stock cooler that came with your CPU, it will already have thermal compound applied. Many all-in-one liquid coolers already have the thermal compound applied to the heatsink. But if you're doing it yourself, you don't apply it to the heatsink, you apply it to the CPU itself. This is actually called the IHS, or the internal heat spreader. But it's basically the top of the CPU right there. It says Intel Core i7. I apply thermal compound a bit differently if you're new here. I don't follow the sheep because I run a business and because I was trained way back in the early days. We developed techniques for applying thermal compound that ensured full contact coverage across the entire heat spreader. And what I do is I grab a nitrile glove right here, and I get them as thin as I can get them. I think these are like 3 mils or something. They're really, really thin. And it's important these are clean. You ready for your exam? No? You sure? Scythe includes this tube of thermal compound here, which has plenty of thermal compound. We could probably cover 3 Intel CPUs with this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little bit on here, pretty much like they describe online. A lot of times they talk about a pea size, a grain of rice size. I don't know, everything's food related. But what I do, once I put that on, if I can get the camera to get a close-up of it, you can watch. I'm going to use the finger on the glove and I'm going to finger paint the thermal compound on here. And what I'm trying to do, essentially, is I don't want any part of the metal exposed on the top of the CPU. And I don't want so much of it that it's dripping off. So there's this delicate balance between too much and too little. You're almost better off having too much than having too little. If I feel like I've overdone it, I can just switch fingers. Like you see, there's quite a bit left on this first finger. So I'll just use another finger and start to thin it out a little bit. And if I tap on it, and it makes all these little hills and valleys, nooks and crannies, what that does is when I place the heatsink down on top of the CPU and I add the pressure from the screws tightened down on it, that flattens out and removes any potential for, I don't know, air bubbles and things that people on the internet freak out about, even though it's not really a thing. Unless you're cooling with liquid nitrogen, you know, this is not an airtight system and air can get in and go out, and this material becomes quite viscous when it heats up, and it has to be under a set applied amount of pressure designated by the manufacturer. So just taking a piece of glass, which is very porous material, and pushing it down to demonstrate air bubbles is neither applying the proper amount of equal pressure as designated by the manufacturer, nor is it allowing the material any opportunity to heat up and become viscous. So be careful of some of the demonstrations you see on YouTube, that they aren't very well thought out or scientific, and they can be very convincing over a non-existent issue. But it is your build, not mine, and you do it however you want to. I'm just explaining the way I do it, where I'm able to maintain a living, where I have to support these computers. And I had one client whose CPU fan wasn't even plugged in. For over a year, the fan wasn't plugged in. And the only reason they called me out was they were running out of storage space on their solid state drive. And I said, how's the computer running? He goes, best computer we ever had. I go, does it ever feel like it's slowing down? Nope. That's interesting because your CPU fan hasn't been plugged in for over a year. What does that mean? That's typical. That's a real conversation that happened. So I plugged it back in. I mean, it was plugged in, but it was like plugged in sideways. It wasn't on all three of the pins or all four of the pins. It was like off by one pin. And so as a result, the fan wouldn't turn at all. And this was a Core i5 that was in use at a business. It was being used, 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. They never had a problem with it. They had a 120 gig solid state drive in there that was filling up. And they were getting out of memory errors because of the lack of drive space. And I used a Cronus and cloned them to a 240 or a 500. And when I was in there, I noticed the CPU fan was unplugged. So when you hear all these people talking about excessive application of thermal compound and air bubbles and all this other nonsense, keep in mind what I just told you. On the bottom of the heatsink, you'll see there's a piece of tape. It's got a kind of a hazard sign on it with an exclamation point. It wants you to remove this tape. If there's one thing I'd like to see Scythe improve on, there should be like a little red tab that sticks out. So this is more obvious. I've even during a live video installed one of these, forgot to take the tape off. And thankfully some folks in the chat room were like, hey, Carey, not that this is the end of the world. It'll still cool, but it won't cool anywhere near as effectively. The reason the tape is on there is to keep the surface as free from any dirt, dust, oils from your skin. This has to be the flattest, most perfect surface to transfer heat in the most efficient way. So you don't take this tape off until you're ready to install. Now, once again, I have to lay the case flat, which isn't going to give you much of a view here. And you'll see that this heatsink, on one side, a screw sticks out, and on the other side, the screw is kind of underneath the heatsink. This side here goes towards your RAM, and that's going to give us room for the fan in that little gap right there. If we wanted to add another fan to the other side, this side here, we could add a fan to this side. Notice this cutaway right here? That's for systems that have RAM on the other side, and that's giving you a little clearance for taller RAM. That's how well thought out this heatsink is. It's pretty unusual to see something this big and so well thought out for under $50. That's a hell of a deal. So this is going to go in this direction. The RAM is going to be on this side over here. The I/O shield's on that side, and this just sits with gravity on top of the CPU. And I'm going to use the driver that Scythe has included, and I'm going to start turning one screw, just a couple of turns, just so it started. We're going to go in on the top hole right here, and that's going to align with the other screw, and we'll give that one a couple of turns until I can feel it start to align. There it goes. You can feel the resistance when it goes in there. We'll come back over. Now, this is the last time I'm going to tell you that you want to tighten the screws equally on both sides. And when it comes to CPU cooling, whether we're talking about that rear bracket or, more importantly, this heatsink, it's important that the screws get tightened down on opposite sides about equally. Do not tighten down one side first, or there could be a warp that occurs. And it's nothing you're going to be able to see with your naked eye. It's just you're not going to get the cooling performance that you were expecting. And you can take it off, you can inspect it. I did have a repair video here where I got lucky and I was able to show you that the thermal material hadn't been making contact with the CPU from the heatsink. It was on might have been on that Hyper 212, I forget. Anyway, no, it was a liquid cooler. It was a liquid all-in-one cooler, and the thermal material had a pattern on it from the manufacturer, and that pattern was uninterrupted, meaning that, once it makes contact, it would smear it out. It never got smeared out because it never made contact. But when you're looking at it, it looks like it's fitting, right? But when you flip it over and look underneath, you're like, clearly, one side was making contact and the other side wasn't. And it looked like they'd used the wrong mounting bracket for it. Now, on the Scythe cooler, these screws that secure it, just to give you another angle, there's the screw on this side that I'm tightening down. This is the side towards the RAM. And then we go into this hole right here to get that other screw tightened. When you tighten these, they come to a dead stop. So you don't have to wonder, how far do I take it before I'm over tightening. these will come to a dead stop. We can put the cooling fan on now. All the computer fans, in fact, every fan you ever see in your life, will have support brackets for the frame on one side. That's the side the air comes out of. This side here, you'll see the center spins, right? You see the label spinning? This is the side that's drawing air in, pulling air in, and it's pushing it out through this side. You see that side doesn't spin. The motor's back there. So when we put the fan on, we want to place it on so that the air is blowing through the cooler, and it's going to hit this rear case fan, which is also mounted in the same direction. It's pulling air in, and it's blowing it out through the back. There's no filters on any of this. We don't filter exhaust air. We would only filter input air. And on this case, because there is no graphics card, we're going to let the vacuum that nature creates automatically pull in as much air as it needs. And we will not have any cooling issues with this computer. Now, this is another one of those situations where it's best to do your wire management on this fan before you install it, because of the, at least with this Corsair 200R case, it's a little tight to get in there once we've installed it. So I'll take 2 more of these nylon zip ties. These wire ties, they have wire in them. And over the years, they will get brittle and break off and fall into your computer, and they could short circuit something like behind the motherboard. I strongly advise you to remove all wire ties and replace them with nylon zip ties, whether it's a part you're using or not using, to avoid any potential future issues. Now, when it comes to wire tying this, I don't like the way that they overlapped it. I like the cable to overlap itself like this, so that the cable can be completely flattened against itself. And then I'll just tighten down the bottom of it and the top of it to keep it flush, like that. And we'll do the other side right here. And I'll grab my wire cutters and we'll cut those little pigtails off. So the plug on this fan is going to go right up at the edge of the board here. So when I'm putting the fan on, I want to make sure I'm not having the cable routed unnecessarily around it. That not only looks terrible, but it offers the opportunity for any sort of interference for the cable to hit the fan and prevent the fan from spinning, especially when I'm shipping this. Who knows, the way it's going to be jostled around during shipping. So we want to reduce the opportunity for that to ever happen. So the first thing I need to do is make sure that the side of the fan that the air is coming out of is going to be facing the heatsink. It's going to go through there with the cable facing towards the edge of the board where it's going to plug in. And I'm going to place these little metal hanging brackets into the mounting holes right up here on the front of the fan. We'll put one on each side. And you'll see that goes in very easily. It just aligns, and you just push it in. And it looks like this. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. So that is what that's going to look like. Now there's a cutout in the top of the heatsink, and we've shown this, we being Mitch Morrison and myself. Mitch has joined me on the channel here, and this fan is going to go right into the recess. And it's easier for me to plug the fan in right now. On this motherboard, the fan header for the CPU is gray. It's a different color than all the other fan headers. And the plug has a little groove in it so that it only goes on in one direction. And it is a 4-pin fan and a 4-pin fan header. Now I can align this fan with the groove in the side of the heatsink on both sides, and it's going to hit the top mounting screw, and that's how far down I know to put the fan. And then I pull back on those wire hangers, and it's gonna make me look like a fool is what it's gonna do. Make sure it's in the slot. There's one side. I'm just pushing the wire away from me, and it falls in and locks into the fins on the side of the heatsink. And that's all there is to that. We're just about ready for our first power on to see if this thing's going to work. Of course it's going to work. Just a couple more cables to hook up. There's this big motherboard power cable, and I could just plug it right in, but it'll look terrible. So what I'm going to do is run it out through this little wiring management hole here. You notice how I untangle all these wires from each other now before I run the cable? Because if I don't do it now, later on when I do the cable management, I'll be forced to unplug it and do it then. All of our front port I/O, the USB ports, audio, reset, power switch, the LEDs, that's all these cables right here, which if I turn this around, you can see a little bit better. They're just held on with a wire tie so they don't flop it around and shipping and potentially breaking the connectors or slap it against the fan. I'm not going to use this front fan. I will replace the wire tie with a nylon zip tie, and then I tuck it into this little slot right here. And it'll be like having a spare fan in the future. If there's ever a fan issue, the customer can move it or I can move it. This motherboard power connector, before I feed it through here, I want to remove the wire tie. Right here, that's where it is. And then we'll just clear these out of the way by pulling them through. This is our front audio connector right here. And down here on the case, we can run this right now, right in through that little hole. Now, if your power supply is longer than this one, you'll have to come in over here. But this is so easy to hook up. I just want to get it out of the way. On every motherboard, all of the ATX and Riker ATX boards, your front audio connector is usually in this left quadrant, right back here, which means, you know, you're going to the exact opposite end of the case with the cabling. Of course you are. Now, we can look at the instructions that came with the board, or we can read the board and look at the connectors, and we can see that there's a pin missing out of this connector, out of this plug rather, and one matching one out of the connector. It only fits in one place properly. It won't seat otherwise. And in this case, it actually says audio right inside the connector. It only will let you plug it in right side up. If you try to plug it in upside down, it won't seat. There's no clip. There's nothing to hold it in other than friction. And it's very dark in there, and I can't really see which end has the missing pin. So what I do is I just kind of feel for it. Don't put a lot of force on any of your parts. When it seats properly, you'll feel it start to seat, and then you know you can apply the appropriate pressure for it to bottom out. And that just holds in, like I say, with friction. We won't need any more of these power connectors because we're not hooking up anything else as far as any drives go, not at this time anyway. And I have to decide if I want to, for whatever reason, that cable, all these cables are coming out the top and this one's coming out the bottom. And I don't like the way that looks. I think these all need to come out through the bottom. Once again, little stuff like this I like to take care of early in the build process. But I'm not going overboard with it with regards to doing the cable management until I know everything's working and I don't have to take anything back apart. So yeah, I think that looks a lot better. down here by having those cables all routed underneath the main power cable. What I will do is I will grab a wire nylon zip tie, and this will all get, basically each cable gets individually folded, just like it came from the manufacturer. And I'll do this long after I've got everything done on the system. But then you take each one, just following the bend in the cable that's already been there the way it was packaged. And then I will take one bigger, thicker 8-inch nylon zip tie, and I'll go through the holes on the bottom of this case, and those will all be tied together and secured down. Now the customer will never see that. There's no window here, and if I have to do any work on this computer in the future, if I'm going to add a drive or add another hardware device, I don't have to ask the customer where their modular cables are, and they've forgotten. All the cables are there. Super easy to work on. Getting back to this motherboard power connector, we're going to look to see where the connector is. The connector's way up at the top, aligns with this bigger hole up here. So I will feed in this larger cable through that to get it as close as I can to where it's going to end up being plugged in. There's a clip on one side, and on every motherboard I've ever worked on, that clip faces the outside edge. This is a large connector, and it's going to be a little difficult for me to show you without getting in the way of the camera. But I've got to turn the connector so that the clip is on the outside edge, and I'm going to have to stand in the way for a moment so I can align it. Some of this stuff you got to look straight on to see it. Once the connector is aligned, you'll feel it. Then you can add force to seat it. Don't just start adding force. You want to feel that seat properly or to align properly with the pins. Then you add the force and you'll hear it click into position. We've got the USB 3.0. It's this plug right here. And it's this weird looking flat cable that has this funky connector on the end. And you'll see it's got a little notch on the top. And that's for the two USB 3s right up here. And you see this connector? This connector is the same. Even if they only gave us one USB 3, we'd still have to use this connector, which means we lose a USB port. So think about that when you're buying a case. If they're giving you one USB 3 and one USB 2, you're losing one USB 3 and one USB 2 because they're connected in pairs. This connector supports two. So if the other end of this connector only has one wire on it, you've lost the ability to use the other one that you paid for with your motherboard, but that you sacrificed with your cheap case. So in this one, I can either come in through here, because remember the connector is there, and go down, or I can come in through the lower one and slightly go up. It's just a judgment call. There's no right or wrong here. It only goes in one direction with the notch facing the cutout. And once again, you will lightly align it until you feel it start to seat. Then you add pressure. Sometimes you hear a click, sometimes you don't. Give it a light tug, it should not fall off. The last thing we've got to hook up is our front port switches and LEDs. So that's our power switch, reset switch, power LED, and reset LED. These are super easy. On all motherboards, the layout is the same. We're going to come in down through this bottom hole. Once again, I'll zip tie all this and make it look pretty later. And on this bottom corner, this is where all the switches and LEDs go on every motherboard. Unless there's some mini ITX systems, they move it to a different position. But and also on some pre-builts, they move them. But if you're building your own system, 90% of you plus should have it right here down in this corner. And they all follow the same layout, which is silly why this isn't already just done by the manufacturer. In fact, NZXT will often just give you one plug to plug in. I don't know why everybody else doesn't do that. Starting with the first two pins all the way down here on the left with the positive cable facing the outer edge, bottom two pins. Notice this is going on horizontally, not vertically. I'm going to use the first two pins with positive to the edge. That's the hard drive LED. Just doesn't want to feel like it's going in properly. Now, this is a dark area and the pins are very fine, so if you need a flashlight or you need some magnification glasses, this will be where you need them. And it's just 4 wires, so it's not that big of a deal. You handle it 1 wire at a time, it'll be over before you know it. So I'm going to grab my readers and my flashlight so I can see the pins. And your motherboard manual will also confirm the location and the orientation of these wires. But I can tell you from experience, the hard drive LED goes on the bottom 2 pins, positive cable going closest to the edge. The power LED will go on just above that with the power cable over the power cable and the positive cable over the positive and the negative over the negative. And those 2 cables right now that I'm plugging in represent the power light that comes on when you power on the computer. And I had that on the wrong set of pins. I had it on the top row. I thought I was on the bottom row. So the hard drive LED on the bottom row, the power LED on the top row, one goes above the other, starting at the edge. If your LEDs don't light up, then you've either plugged them into the wrong place or you reverse the polarity, meaning you put negative where positive goes and positive where negative goes, but you wouldn't have heard anything. Reset switch goes on the next 2 pins right beside the hard drive LED, and the power switch goes above the reset switch on the next 2 pins just to the right of the power LED, and you're done. That's all there is. You've finished your build. Now we're ready to turn it on and do what we call the smoke test. See, a lot of people don't know this, but computers, they run on smoke, and if you let the smoke out, they don't run anymore. So if you've got a computer that's not running, maybe you've let the smoke out of it. How's that for sarcasm? I mean, look, if you can't beat them, join them. If everybody's going to promote ignorance online, and I'm sitting there getting upset that people will continue to do that, then I guess I'll just join right along with them. I do have to put the RAM in, though. We're not going to get too far without RAM, and that's super, super easy. Again, everything you're seeing is brand new, all unscripted. Nothing's been rehearsed. And one of my little figures keeps falling off the microwave. This is as real as it gets to you doing it at home. So if you really want a realistic idea of what to expect in your computer building process, I believe my videos are the most accurate representation of how long it should take, as well as things to look out for and why. So here I've got the 2 RAM modules. Sometimes getting the parts out of the package is harder than installing the parts. Companies like to cover their logos with protective plastic, and it doesn't hurt to leave the plastic on, but it just really bothers me. So I always make it a point to peel that plastic off, which the manufacturer does intend for you to do, and then that looks all nice and shiny. You'll see there's a cutout in the RAM. That ensures that the RAM only goes in one direction. We've got 4 slots on this build. With Gigabyte, we use DIMM number 1 and number 2, and they're separated by a DIMM in the middle. So they're actually colored gray and black. We're going to use the gray ones, and your motherboard manual will also verify that for you. And one side of this opens and one side of this doesn't. Some boards that both sides open. Oh, you know what? And this side doesn't. So we're going to open up both sides. We're going to slide the RAM in. Once again, make sure it aligns properly. First and foremost, make sure that that groove is aligned with the socket. Once it's seated properly, then you can add force to one side and then the other side. If you do this with the computer case laying flat, you can work with gravity. I've got it upright just to show you, but this is not the ideal way to install RAM. But if I lay the case flat, you won't be able to see me do it. We're going to skip a socket, right? We're sticking with the gray ones here. Keep the RAM oriented in the same direction. Place it into the slot. Make sure that it's aligned properly. Once you've verified, you can feel it. Then one side, push down, other side. And you'll see that board does flex a little bit. Nothing wrong with that. This is not 1974 anymore. Now, we're ready to do our first power on self-test, and I don't have a spare monitor here. Would you guys mind if I use your monitor at home? Because I don't, do you see a monitor? I don't have one. So I'd like to use yours, and you can tell your friends that you know a guy who has, how many viewers do I have? Because that's how many monitors I'm about to hook up to. I got 1,227 viewers, so you can tell your friends you know a guy who hooked up 1,227 monitors to his computer on his very first boot. It's a bit excessive. In the empty motherboard box, I'm going to put all the documentation, all the parts we haven't used. And to do our first power on, I need a keyboard and a mouse. So I've got a spare wireless keyboard and mouse right here. And links to these, again, in the notes under the video from my Amazon store. There's the wireless dongle. This keyboard and mouse share the same dongle, which I like. I don't have to plug one in for the keyboard and one in for the mouse. We'll plug that in anywhere in the back. I need an HDMI cable to plug into the back of your monitor at home, which I happen to have right here. Once again, these are the Twisted Vanes HDMI cables from Amazon. They look like that. And we'll plug that in to the back of the motherboard using the built-in video chip on the the built-in graphics chip that's built into our Intel CPU. Finally, all I need is a power cable. So if we pull this down here, we'll make sure the switch is, see that switch? Make sure it's in the off position, just to be safe. And we'll grab our power cable and we will put that in just like that. And then we can flip the switch on. Now we are ready to do our first power on with this build. You've seen everything come out of the boxes. Nothing's been edited. This whole thing has been live this entire time, including the interruptions from the deliveries. And we started this video, well, how long ago was it? Nearly 3 hours ago. And this whole time I've been talking to you. I'm not just building. So clearly you can do it faster than 3 hours, even if you've never done it before. But I'm telling you, slow down and enjoy your build, because once you start this process and it works, you are going to want to do it again. I'm going to reach over and I'm going to hit this power button right here, and ideally we will see the power light light up and the fans start to spin, which they're doing, and you can't hear anything because it's whisper quiet. We're going to switch over to the camera 2 input, which is the back of your monitor, and we need to give this a few seconds for it to initialize what CPU we have. It's going to say no signal for just a moment. Be patient as it's figuring out everything. It's going to post power on self-test, POST. It's already cycled itself on and back on again. That's normal. Be patient. It's doing it again. The BIOS is addressing the hardware that you've put into the system. There's any number of different RAM and CPU configurations we could have added, and the BIOS on the first boot takes a moment to adjust and accommodate what you've installed. Yes, we put a K processor in a non-Z chipset because we want the added performance that a K processor gives us out of the box. It's about 10% faster out of the box than a non-K processor of the same model. But we don't want to pay extra for the motherboard for overclocking features the customer doesn't want or need. The customer just wants the performance. So these processors were like on sale for $5 more. Would you pay $5 more to go 10% faster? Because that's a 9700 versus a 9700K if you can catch them on sale. That takes us into the BIOS. As you can see, that's what it's supposed to do. At this point, we can check to see if there's a newer BIOS. We can see what BIOS version we've got. This says F14. I'm not sure if F14 is the latest one. We can quickly go to Google and we can do a search for H370 HD3. And we can look up then the support site of Gigabyte's page for this motherboard and see what the latest BIOS version is. And I've got a quick tip that shows you how to do this. So I'm just going to do it on the streamer. And it shows F14 is the latest BIOS available. So we've already got that, which is fantastic. And now we can begin to install Windows. To install Windows, you have to make a Windows 10 installation bootable media, which is what I've got right here. And I have a quick tips video that shows you how you can make this. It's completely free. If you want to activate Windows, that costs money. But you can download and install Windows completely legally, completely free, and make your own bootable Windows 10 installation media. And my quick tips video shows you how to do that. We're going to turn the machine back off. So I'll hit the power button. You'll see that it's all going back off. The fans are stopping now. They'll stop spinning. I'm going to plug this USB flash drive into a blue USB port because those are faster and I want my install to go quickly. We're going to turn the machine back on, and now the machine only has one place it can possibly boot from. You see that hard drive or the solid state drive we plugged in, it doesn't have any partition, no format. They don't know if we're going to use it in a Mac or Linux. So when the machine starts up for the first time, it's looking for anything it can boot from. And right now, that only thing it can boot from is that flash drive. Now watch how fast Windows 10 is going to install on this monster. All of these defaults are perfect. I hit next and install now. And then it's going to come up here and ask us for a product key. I'm going to say I don't have a product key. I'm going to be installing Windows 10 Pro, but for right now, I say I don't have a product key. Without the product key, it doesn't know what version of Windows 10 you want. With the product key, it installs whatever version the product key is good for. I know it's Windows 10 Pro right now, so I'll select Windows 10 Pro. Hit next, I get the end user license agreement, which you have no choice but to agree to. And then I'm going to do a custom install, and it sees drive 0, which is the 2 terabyte ADATA drive that we installed. And all I have to do is hit next, and it's going to automatically partition and format and install Windows 10 to that drive. And all we have to do at this point is wait a couple of minutes. And I think you'll be surprised with just how fast this is going to load. And while we're waiting, I can start putting all the spare parts in this motherboard box. All the documentation, the power cable. I use my own power cable. So I give the customer their nice, neat power cable. That can all go in the box. This little cover I talked about, the thermal compound that's left over from the installation of the cooler can go back in the Ziploc bag with the rest of the cooler parts we're not using. The extra screws from the case, even the thumb screws to put the side panels on, I'll keep them in here so I don't lose them. Oh, and the screwdriver that comes with the cooler, customer gets that as well. Now everything's in one location for any future work. A couple other contributions have come in that I've not noticed, so while we're waiting on this to complete, I will give a proper shout out and thank you. To what I've missed here. Abdul Azim Patel with a $20 contribution said he had 2 hardware issues today. A Logitech G300S mouse would not left click, and he went to Office Max and bought the new one of the same model. Got it for $19.99 plus tax because he price matched with Target. And then he had Wi-Fi issues that maybe are driver related. Yeah, that's pretty common. Jason Wyrick contributed $3. Arvid Bulharis has contributed again 1,000 Norwegian kroner. He says, thanks, David and Carey. Don't worry about my last name. It's not very English friendly. Still like to try and pronounce it. Thank you for your generosity, Arvid. Degier06 contributed €5. He says, long-time viewer, congrats on your 300,000 subs. Will you do another scammer video? Oh yeah, those are always, yeah, I just have work to get caught up on first. David Starbuck with a $50 contribution, saying thank you to Kurt, and it matches Kurt's $50 contribution. David, thank you for all your generosity today. Thanks, Abdul and Jason and Arvid. Thanks, you guys, for helping keep me sponsor-free here as we begin our first reboot on our Windows 10 install. See, that Windows 10 just goes in lickety-split. And in just a moment here, it's going to ask us for a username. because I need a wider angle camera here. This build, I think this is going to a gentleman named Mohammed. So when I get asked for the username, let's see, United States, US keyboard, no secondary layout, don't have internet. It's important that you don't have internet during your Windows 10 install, or it's going to force you to create an online Microsoft account. I like to create offline accounts. And when the customer gets the computer, if they want to create an online account, they can always do that on their own. I'm going to continue with limited setup right here. That's again meaning an offline account. And we'll put Mohammed's name in here. Mohammed. Next. Skip the password by just clicking next. I'll click no on Cortana and decline again from Cortana. And I turn off everything but location settings. I like to leave location settings on for the time and date to be set automatically. And that completes our Windows 10 installation. It's just that easy. Now I need to install the Windows 10 drivers. I think Mohammed wants to add a Wi-Fi card to this. I got to verify a few other things. The only thing I'm curious about right now is how fast this ADATA drive is. And I'm running out of time. We're just going on 3 hours. It's 6:45 in the evening here. I got a bit of a late start today. So I'm going to save the Prime 95 heat test, torture test for another day. And of course, we're using built-in graphics, so I'm not worried about the Heaven benchmark or anything because it's not a gaming machine. Although it will game, it's just not going to be the best at it. But what I am curious about is the performance of the ADATA drive, considering that it's only a few dollars more currently than Intel's SSD. That's also 2 terabytes. And I think this is faster. So as soon as this is done, and obviously it would be ideal to make sure all the drivers are in place to get the most accurate performance readings from Crystal Diskmark. And the benefit of time, I'm just going to run it right now. So Windows 10 is just about completed. There we are. We're done. I'm going to go ahead and pull this flash drive and plug in my other flash drive that has my utilities on it. Crystal Diskmark and all my utilities that you see me use are all free for you to download. Use Google to locate them. You'll see I always use free portable versions of the software that doesn't require installation. And we want the Crystal Diskmark software, and I'll just copy it off here. So on the Intel drive, it would get about maybe 2400, 2500 on the reads. And I'm very curious how this ADATA drive compares. Sometimes it's a blessing in disguise when I'm forced to have to choose other manufacturers' parts. In this case, I couldn't find the Intel 2 terabyte drives. And this drive is significantly faster. It's basically a third faster for only about $20 more. I'm not even sure it's a $20 difference. It may be less price difference than that. And assuming the reliability is just as good as Intel's, I have never seen a bad solid state drive. And as I suspected, this is significantly faster than Intel's QLC-based technology. And yet it's priced very competitively. For 2 terabytes, I want to say that drive is $250. The link for it is in the notes below this video, along with the motherboard and the case and the power supply and the RAM. That's all in the video notes below the video. I don't specify generally what the price is because the prices constantly change. You might be watching this video in 2027. So the price for these parts, if you can even find them, isn't going to be what we're talking about today. A lot of people don't realize or think about the fact that this video will be available in perpetuity. And so while you might be watching it live or you might be watching it within days or weeks or months of it originally airing, Soon thereafter, those prices are no longer representative, nor would the parts necessarily be recommended. And it stands as just a moment in time of which parts were available at the best price point during that time. And I think it adds confusion, especially if people leave comments saying, well, you know, that part is this much money over at this place. Well, just during that time when you posted that comment. But if somebody reads your comment 6 months later, that's probably not true anymore. And your comment stays with the video, again, in perpetuity. So there's this assumption that everything that you're reading and seeing is all happening right now. I've posted videos that I've done 11 years ago, and some of the viewers think I used a different camera or filmed in a different location. They didn't acknowledge I looked 11 years younger, that I was using standard definition with in-camera microphone. It didn't occur to them that that content was 11 years old. They saw it was a new video. Some people just, I don't know, man, you got to really spell it out for them. So I try to not be that specific with the pricing because the videos are up for such a long period of time and the pricing is only going to be the same for a very fraction of that over the history of the video. But in general, this is about $1,000 build currently in May of 2020. You're right around $1,000 with the operating system. The write speed's 2600. I think on the Intel side, it's like 2000, 1800, I think. This is definitely a third faster, but it definitely doesn't cost a third more. Might start seeing me using a lot more of these ADATA drives if that pricing remains that competitive. And if Intel doesn't bring their drive prices back down, I suspect you're going to see a lot more of these ADATA drives. That's a hell of a deal. Brian Loss has contributed $9.99. He says the first PC had Windows for work groups 3.11 and DOS 6.2, 4 megs of RAM, a 400 megabyte hard drive, a 486 DX2 50 megahertz, and that was the good old days. Yep, been there, done that. Then you had to explain the difference to customers with the DX versus the SX was, what a math coprocessor was, and why that would be important to them or not important to them. Because the company I worked for at that time did AutoCAD workstations, the math coprocessor was pretty important. Yeah, I'm very impressed with the numbers on the ADATA drive, especially for the price. That's 2 terabytes. Michael Dane says it's $239.99, so $240 today for that ADATA drive. And the Intel 2 terabyte SSD 6, I think is like the same price. It's only a few dollars difference. And I think this number right down here, this 19.57, I don't think that's right. I want to run that test one more time. I might have been moving the mouse or doing something. That number I think should be significantly larger. So I'm just going to run the bottom series of tests just one last time. Yeah, I guess that might be right. Maybe that's performance on those smaller files is definitely not as good. I always pay attention to the top numbers because that's the best you can expect under the perfect circumstances. That's what I focus on. How you use your computer is unique to you, and I don't want to differentiate and specify how each individual's potential to use their computer affects the performance. Instead, I focus on the max performance. If everything is ideal, this is the best you're going to get. That's where I keep my focus on my videos, to keep it as simple as possible. So I guess those numbers were accurate. But I always focus again on the top numbers. And the 3441 is a best case read speed, and the 2599, that's a best case write speed. That's when you're writing and reading very large files. Overall, for $240 for 2 terabytes of NVMe storage, that's a hell of a deal. I think that's going to wrap it up for me today. Let's go ahead and start buttoning things up here. I'm going to go ahead and close this out. We'll shut this down. This thing is dead silent. You can't hear it at all. It's already off. Nice. And we'll go back to full screen here on camera 1. There we go. So, my friends, thank you so much for joining me. I want to give another shout out to everybody who has contributed during today's stream. Let's see what we've got here. Brian Loss, Abdul Azim Patel, Jason Wyrick, Arvid Baleras, DeGiro6, David Starbuck, many contributions and very generous today from David. Thank you so much. Mira Ora, Kurt Keegans, Michael Dane, David Griswold, Andrew Brockington, Dale Maluk, the Surly Sasquatch, the Dodge Whisperer, Eduardo Turan, Mark Stevens, W. Trexel, Diane Glue, Donald Strickland, Sharon Idle, Don Perrotta, Joseph Hawkins, Paul Carroll, Navy retired, Paul Carroll again, Dale Maluk again, David Starbuck about 6 or 7 more times, John Wilson, thank you, and John Young, Bill Ottinger, Irving T, John Yasuda, Paul Stallion 48, Kashev M, Geo Johnson, Cor Vanderpoort, Ken Schmidt, Vince Marath, Carlos J, Christoph Esch, Michael Martin, Michael M, Ryan Grady, John Craig, Darren Kluth, Kevin Arsenault, Mira Ora again, Jamie M, and Mark's Brother 715, Mark Stevens, Orlando Breve, Andrew Lipinski, Kevin Arsenault, again, thank you, Kevin, Joe Bush, Samuel Ramos. The first contribution today from Abdul Azim Patel. Thank you, Abdul. And one just came in from Johnny Ortiz for $2. Thank you, Johnny. Today's show is being brought to you by David Starbuck. So thank you so much, David, for not only tonight's contributions, but your past contributions as well. And of course, previously mentioned David Hale, Colin Hilton, David Stetzel, Stephen Bernstein, John Wilson, and Peter Laycock. These guys have just gone above and beyond in their generosity, and I can't thank them enough, and thank all of you for being a part of this amazing community that we're building here. And I know Mohammed is still waiting to get a price on this system for me, so I have to email Mohammed. And then I've got a few more to build yet, and it looks like we're going to be giving one away here. Normally I'm giving away sort of lower end systems, but we're going to build a brand new one to give away to one lucky viewer, which I never thought I would ever do, but it looks like that's happening. So again, I appreciate all of you being kind to one another in the chat room, for participating in the chat, for tuning in. I want to remind you once again, if you enjoy this content, you can let me know by hitting the like button, the little thumbs up button. And if you want to be aware when new content is posted, you've got to click the subscribe button and hit that bell icon to turn notifications on so you can be sent alerts when I'm broadcasting. Because right now I'm not on any particular schedule other than as time permits. That's going to wrap it up for me for today. I hope to see you all again very, very soon. Until then, bye for now.